It's time for MacBreak Weekly. Andy's here, Alex is here, Jason's here, the whole gang's here. We will talk about revelations about Apple's next event. We think we know when it's going to be. We also think we know what they're going to release. And maybe you saw some pictures from a Russian YouTuber that purport to be the new MacBook. Is that real? We'll discuss it next on MacBreak Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 942, recorded Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. Amazing, if somewhat flatulent. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show we get together, talk about the latest news from Apple. Joining me, as always, around the virtual table, Alex Lindsay from officehours.global. Hi, Alex.
Hello, hello.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Jason Snell, sixcolors.com.
It's good to be seen by you, Leo.
What salute is that?
I don't know.
That's like the robot salute.
Before we started, there were some Shakespearean renditions going on, and now I feel like I need to be like, acting!
Hail
Genius! Brilliant!
He's a thespian.
We are not usually that dramatic here at MacBreak Week.
No. And finally, but not last but not least, as they say, Andy Ihnatko from GBH in Boston, back in the they got him out of the jail cell. He's back in the library.
No, I complied. I was very, very helpful. I'm looking forward to probably a lot of text messages from some friends of mine in the next 3 to 60 days. But you know, I'm a citizen. I have responsibilities. Just
time off for good behavior is never to be shunned. So I really have been watching this all week. This crazy Russian leak of what is supposedly a M4 MacBook Pro, way ahead of the release.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking Russia, deep fake. I'm thinking it's a fake.
Yeah, 100%. Like when it started off by, hey, here's a picture of the box, and I'm like, look, I know you think you're getting clever and trying to get hits, but Apple never lets like a boxed thing actually.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like it's a prototype sample that someone left in a bar or something like that. I'm going to be responsible and not talk about.
They
this
said they bought it in a private Facebook group.
Yep.
So I think it's real, and I got a few reasons for it. One is I think you've got warehouses in China. Something walked away. They probably, this is the M4, the base model, which means that chip is probably, they made that in advance, right? It's not the one with the M4 Pro. So those they've been probably stockpiling for a while. A few of them walk away. How did they get to Russia? Apple isn't shipping products to Russia anyway. Yeah. Well, China to Russia is a pathway that exists that is pretty reasonable. And actually, the number one reason that I think it's real is because it's boring. Because it's literally a laptop we've seen before, a chip we've seen before, specs that are widely reported. Yeah. It is for a leak of new Apple hardware before it even gets announced. It's not that interesting. If you were going to fake it, you'd make it more interesting. You'd have a fake Mac Mini, or you'd have a fake M4 Pro benchmark or something, and we don't have any of that. It's just dull.
Also, we're seeing now we're seeing multiple videos from like multiple places. It's pretty big. And also, maybe I'm just sort of like trying to backfill the logic, but it kind of makes sense, because name one country where Apple is now like not existing, and so it's not.
So if ever there were a black market, it'd be in Russia,
well,
right?
That's true, and B, Apple can't punish anybody in Russia for anything,
especially Romance V768.
Yeah,
because
well, and
apparently there are, according to Tom's Hardware, the latest is there are as many as 200 units up for sale. So this isn't. This sounds like a pallet
it sounds like something like
a master case.
And it could be one of those things. This is where the danger of trying to ship really close to when you announce comes out, is because you're packing all these pallets. You're trying to make sure you're ready to go. You're trying to make sure that they're all at the stores, everything else. There's a whole bunch of logistics there. So if Apple was trying to make sure that these are ready the day of the announcement, or the day before, the 3 days after the announcement, they would have to be about this time. They'd have to be putting these on pallets and putting them on planes and getting them, into the United States. So the timing is about right for the leak, because it's early, but
Yeah.
it sounds like it's about 2 weeks early, which is about when you'd have to be sending them from China. so it it wouldn't either most likely on the Chinese side. It does sound like a pallet just went the wrong way.
Apple, according to Mac Rumor, is potentially facing worst leak since iPhone 4 was left in a bar.
And they told us everything that we expected it to do. Like there's I don't think there's
The only-
anything, as Jason said, I don't.
The only interesting thing is it's black, right? That's new.
Right, it's not new, but it would be new on the low end config. The low end config previously didn't do the space black on the low end, only on the higher end ones. So even that is like not that
I'm
interesting.
staring at a space black MacBook Pro. What am I thinking?
The iPhone 4,
I have one written here.
the iPhone 4, we didn't know anything about it, and it was a huge change in how it looked, and that was a big story. So that I'm not that I'm saying that a headline on the internet might be overhyping things a little bit.
I just think they should have. I think there was a lot of creativity missed here, because they could have had something like it pushes out air underneath it and makes it basically levitate a millimeter above the desk, like something to get just believable enough that you'd believe it, like that it'd be some crazy Apple thing. That would have been more fun.
I'm just curious to see, like, when so Gurman thinks that there's going to be an event like near the end of October. Like, there was for the iPhone 4 thing, Steve Jobs did a curt, self-deprecating, quiet nod. Well, some of you might have seen this before, but here's the whatever. I'm wondering, if they're going to acknowledge this at all. If they do something cool, like Tim Cook, is icing his knuckles. With fresh bruises on his knuckles, don't worry, we've traced the source of the leak.
But I mean, in reality, they probably shot the video for it last month.
Yeah.
So
really,
yeah. Right. I mean, how long did it take to do all the prep work on those things?
Last month. Yeah. I mean, I would have been shooting I would have probably been shooting right after the iPhone one, or even before that.
Yeah.
You have the segments of the stuff that you're going to talk about, and then you have the things that are going to be specific that you're not sure exactly what you're going to say. But the stuff about, they probably would have been doing in August or September. August.
Isn't it hard to match though? I mean, Tim might lose weight.
Those are all big. He seems to be pretty constant, but
exactly.
the turns out if you work out 2 hours a day, an hour a day, you don't stay the same.
Yeah.
So but I think that usually what happens if you look at those are whole big segments. They go underground, they go to some mountaintop, they go to something. You can shoot all those segments completely separately.
Yeah.
And you'd pick the ones that you absolutely know what you're going to say, and then there'll be a handful of them. But I would not want to go into a release at the end of October without all the footage in the can 2 or 3 weeks before. So
by now,
the video is probably sitting there is done. They're probably doing play out tests from the encoders to make sure that it's all working. I mean, but that's they're probably in the 2 weeks out. They're probably in play out tests. They're probably not even in. They're probably not doing any.
So
corrections.
have we learned anything from this? So now I'm going to accept that it is a genuine leak. I was very skeptical, but I'm going to accept that. Have we learned anything from it?
Not really. There have been some Geekbench scores allegedly that have performed maybe as well. Not
how they get it
dramatically,
running. Can you get it running without an Apple account? And if you're in Russia?
Sure. If you can download Geekbench directly from Primate Labs if you want to.
But I mean, how do you get the computer? You can get the computer. It's not. Couldn't Apple have locked these?
You have to activate
it. Oh, it fell
it,
off the truck.
But
deactivate it.
But maybe they didn't know. They just didn't know that this pallet was out there. So they
okay.
That's my guess, is that they were able to activate it.
I would be suspicious of anybody. As weird as it would be to buy one of these alleged 200 Macs. Yeah, Apple's going to know exactly those serial numbers.
Yeah, only buy it if you're a YouTuber and you can get the video out before they.
Well, and with those serial numbers and the way things are tracked, I do feel a little bad for whoever thought that this was a good idea in China, because this is going to go.
Oh, they'll find
that
culprit.
Factory is.
Yeah.
They're
going to, and they don't play nicely over there, so it'll be pretty rough, But I think that the Geekbench is the only real surprise, is that it looks like the M4 was 25% faster than the M3, which is
wow.
That would be that's a big jump.
It's good, but we have iPad M4 benchmarks already, so it's not as if we didn't see what the M4 speed was. It's just seeing it in the context and comparing it to M3, which didn't exist on the iPad, but even that is muted. It is. I mean, I feel bad. It's like you finally got Apple hardware 3 weeks before it came out.
It's nothing special,
but there's not really. It's not that interesting.
Well,
sorry.
wait a minute. If this is the base model and it's 16 gigs, could you infer that this might be the base RAM as well?
Yeah, that's a possibility that's been rumored. That is I think you hit on it. I think that and the fact that the Space Black config is apparently going to be in the base model, if this is the base model, are the two pieces of news. So going up to 16, which was rumored.
Well, we know that the iPhone has more RAM for Apple Intelligence. I presume that they put more RAM in their machines for that as well, right?
I assume so.
It's interesting. I wonder if that is the base model or whether that's just a palette of 16 gigabyte ones. They got a lot of heat in the past about having to when Apple has to go back and say, here's why it's not important to have you have to go look beyond the specs of an Apple piece of hardware. It's not important to have more than 8 gigabytes of system RAM. Don't know if that's the base model now or whether that's just now it's still just available at 16.
10 core CPU, 10 core GPU. This is from the label, which was one of the leaks. 14-inch screen, 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports. Is that new? HDMI port. One more. Yeah. Well, there were 2 Thunderbolt 4s and then one. I can't remember. I'm looking at mine and it has 3 Type-C ports, but I don't know if they're all Thunderbolt 4.
It depends on the chip.
Right. Depends on the chip. Okay. MagSafe 3, headphone jack. So yeah, this looks pretty standard. Well, you know what? We're going to find out when. When are we going to find out? Gurman says they'll be shipping them early November. Like
shipping November 1st. I think it's all going to pop off the week of the 28th. Gurman says, so Mark Gurman at Bloomberg says, Apple Intelligence release is which is 18.1, is targeted for the 28th. I would be surprised, and that it's going to ship on the first. I would be surprised, honestly, if it was not the 28th that they announced these things, because if you're going to ship Apple Intelligence on the 28th, then you probably want to use, if you're going to do a press event or a video or whatever, use that day as your big day to say Apple Intelligence is here. New Macs are here. A new iPad is here. Everything supports it. I suppose you could do it the next day. I don't think it really matters because I think this is just a video event and there'll be some ancillary sort of like press briefings, but that most people, they'll just be, on the 21st or 22nd, they'll say, join us for a video on Monday or Tuesday of next week.
I mean, and it gives you the opportunity to be scary good.
They don't want to do that again.
This is that event time. Although, no, Alex, that's the funny thing. What else is happening that week? Well, Scary Rich, because the annual or the quarterly results will come out on Halloween night, basically 5 p.m. Eastern. Halloween.
And this is the first quarter with the new iPhone in it, so it will be.
And that's
although only a little bit, right?
Yeah,
only a couple weeks.
But still, I think they're going to want to address that. Like the financial news outlets have been talking a lot about expectations for the iPhone 16, both referring back to things like comments that Ming-Chi Kuo made, and also doing a follow up of what happened to the stock price after Ming-Chi Kuo's speculation. So they're not going to have great numbers, but I think they're going to want to at least give shareholders and analysts some sort of, as they say, some color on the iPhone 16 sales and what proportions are the Pros and what proportions are the 16.
Yeah, they like to do that because they'll be able to say, well, the results are only 2 weeks of sales, but we've now had 6 weeks of sales, and we can tell you this, right? That's the kind of thing that they'll do if they want to try to spin sort of like how iPhone sales are going, which they probably do.
So the 28th is a Monday, and then Friday is the 1st. So they would announce Monday with availability the following Friday. Does that sound right? Would you be able to order it Monday for pickup on Friday?
I would imagine that, you'd be able to order it that day or maybe the next day, something like that. The only question is about availability. Will there be some quirks to the availability? They don't want to do that, but that's a possibility, is that the availability will be limited for the new chips, right? For M4 Pro, that maybe that availability.
Apple's breathing a sigh of relief that the longshoremen didn't go on strike.
Well, that's East Coast. I think West Coast would have been. I think most of
they all come into the Western ports.
Coming into the West Coast.
Yeah, and they still fly, a lot of them too. The only other thing I would throw out there is that it's possible they could do this on the 21st, and I only say that because that would allow them a longer runway for the orders. And sometimes that is valuable. It's like they'll ship the end of next week instead, but I'm not sure for the Mac and the
That's
iPad
how they do
mini,
iPhones.
it matters. That's how
They
do
announce
iPhones.
early in the week for order, at the end of the week for delivery the following week.
So it could be the 21st or 22nd as well, if they wanted to do that way and get it out of Halloween week, which would be fine. But I don't know. They very frequently make product announcements right before they do their quarterly earnings, and that would put it smack dab in the week of the 28th.
So Gurman is not saying when the announcement is.
He's not.
Carefully staying away from that. He's just saying November 1st is when deliveries.
Yeah. And that's, I think that speaks also to the fact that this is not just like last year, it's not a traditional event. Last year, if you remember, they played a video. It was late in the day, Eastern time. They had like a thing for like influencers in New York City that day.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But they did, but that's all it was. There was no big public event. They did some media briefings earlier in the day under an embargo, and that was it. So it will probably be that playbook. And if you're not setting up an actual event, the people involved in planning it are different. And if you're Mark Gurman and you've got sources inside like your event planning group, or even the people who are making the video, none of them may know that date because they don't need to.
Right. It's compartmentalized.
They like it that way. Double secret.
Is this where you might announce a new HomePod or a new Apple TV or anything like that?
I mean, I might, but that's not what Mark Gurman says. It sounds like this is very much going to be, it's actually a lot if you think about the Mac, because it's going to be MacBook Pro with an M4 and an M4 Pro chip. It's going to be Mac Mini with an M4 and an M4 Pro chip, and that's going to be the redesigned Mac Mini that's much smaller. And that's going to be cool. They're going to update the iMac to M4 because remember, they're trying to get M3 out of the product line as quickly as they can. And then iPad mini is the other thing that's probably on the agenda here. And that's really interesting because I don't know what chip they're going to put in it. I imagine it'll be an A series chip, but I do think it will probably support Apple Intelligence. I don't think they want to ship anything that doesn't. So it might even be like the same chip that's in the iPhone 16. Wouldn't surprise me if that's the chip that's in there.
Yeah. I love my mini. I mean, this is just a nice form factor. This is from 2021. That's the last release date. So it's got COVID all over it. But other than that,
I can't tell you how much I want a new Mac Mini.
I love this thing. And I mean, I don't know how much you could improve it. It doesn't have a home button. It has a fingerprint reader on. I hope they don't take that off.
No, I don't think
on the on-off button. I love that.
Works with
the
Apple
bezels
Pencil.
aren't huge, but I guess they could be a little smaller.
Yeah, I think they'll update it. Actually, Andy makes a good point. Maybe it supports the Pencil 2 or the Pencil Pro, I guess we're calling it. And maybe they'll update the display. Maybe they won't. It really might just be the chip and Apple Intelligence. And that's fine. Again, like the point of the mini is, even that old mini is still pretty good. And so getting it back
that's the thing. I can't justify buying a new one. There's nothing I would say, oh, it's slow. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I did learn something kind of recently about the market for the iPad mini that made me feel confident they're going to keep it around for in the indefinite future, but also making me wonder if they don't necessarily have a motive to make it super powerful or super current compared to like standard iPads. That apparently we all know that like the regular iPad has sort of displaced aviation documentation. Like in the pilots have to carry checklists, manuals, everything, charts, everything. Now they do it. That's all been standardized on the iPad.
They strap them to their thighs in some cases.
Well, but I'm talking about like from commercial pilots
for
all the way to
jets.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about like the people who are flying to Dallas and everything else. Apparently, the iPad Mini is super popular for that. Again, given that the software infrastructure is all there for like private pilots, like people who are in a small cockpit who don't have necessarily space for a big one. So number one, that makes me feel good because it doesn't mean that okay, this is this fringe product that maybe Apple wants to get rid of, but also maybe they're not necessarily interested or motivated to make it like a iPad Mini Pro or anything kind of close to that. I'm sure they'll keep it current. I'm sure that Jason is right that anything that Apple ships has to be compatible with Apple Intelligence. So that's going to be like basic stakes from now on.
Mini Pro, you complete me.
Yeah. So imagine like because they could put an M series in it, but my guess is it's more like an A18, right? Where they can that'll be because we know A18 will run Apple Intelligence, and you put enough RAM in there. And I think that's the check. Like every device that they're going to do is going to be, does it do Apple Intelligence? Yes.
Ah, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. And that gets you to buy a new one because your old Mini won't do Apple Intelligence.
If you want it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the job that's going forward for Apple, is to make you want Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, because I mean, speaking back to the analyst meeting, that's another thing that, again, financial reporters are kind of harping on. That is, how long is it going to take before Apple Intelligence is real enough that it's going to be a factor in sales of iPhones? There was an analyst who was saying that just a few days ago that he doesn't think that it's going to be prominent until like late 2015, 2025 is at the earliest, but he was really banking on 2026. I don't know if I agree with that, but it does mean that that's probably another thing that they're going to want to talk a lot about during the earnings call, because this is something that they're kind of concerned about, or sorry, not concerned about, but as they're mapping out the expectations for Apple hardware, a lot of it is going to be how fast are they going to come up with real AI features, particularly because with Google, for instance, they're not just putting it into phones, they're also really putting it into their entire business. And also they're starting to ship things. We're talking about NotebookLM. They've probably got their first kind of unqualified hit on their hands with, instead of all the coverage of NotebookLM's audio synopsis features being, oh my God, now Google is trying to fake podcasts and trying to trick us into thinking these. No, it's all about, oh my God, this is so cool. Oh my God, this is so useful. Oh my God, I was using this all week long, and it's so helpful.
I had that reaction. I was like, really? We're gonna like try to make podcasts out of this? But what I find now is that I saw this long PDF on the dangers of TVs, with smart TVs,
right.
and I was like, I don't want to read that. So I just threw it in. I threw it into Notebook.
Do you have it available? You could play a little bit of it for us.
Yeah. Oh,
I'd like to. Every time I hear it, it sounds so canned and fake podcast.
Can I say, while you're looking for that, can I say I made the mistake of, I've got Audio Hijack automatically generates transcripts of like every episode of the Material podcast while we record it, and I made the mistake of, okay, well, why don't I have these two people talk about like Florence Ion and myself and this Google podcast we do, and it's like I was really like, okay, even though it wasn't really people, I'm nervous, like, what do they think? Do they get the right impression? Am I talking too much?
What do the robots think?
Yes. I so want to impress the robots, particularly because they're going to take over soon.
To me, it's just another example of AI doing kind of mediocre. Maybe it's because I'm butthurt because I'm a podcaster, and it's like, how dare they? But it sounds like another example of mediocre kind of.
I wouldn't. I don't agree. Especially if they deliver the stuff that they showed off during the Google I/O keynote. The ability to start again. Imagine being a student. Not only does it will it take your course materials, but now with the latest update, you can put in audio files. You can your lectures that you've recorded. You can also put in YouTube videos. So if you're using,
great for a student, you're right.
Exactly. So if you're using like MIT courseware or Kang Academy, all that sort of stuff, and it's not just have them talk and listen. You can interrupt and say, wait a minute, go back. Like, what was that all about? I don't understand what you're talking about spin on this particle. Like, oh, well, of course, and it'll break off and go into something you're actually talking about. This could be something pretty serious. And again, it demos well, and a lot of people, it's the things that I'm always really, really impressed by are when not only is it an impressive tech demo, but I immediately start thinking, oh, this can solve so many problems for me, or I can think of so many hours of my week that would be so much easier to work through with this tool in hand, using it responsibly, not having it do my homework for me, but helping me to say, oh, okay, I guess I need to check on this section of this 300-page document specifically.
This is the number one thing I think is that of AI that I really do believe has potential, and it's knowledge in very specific domains.
Yes.
And so like Apple is hanging all of their Apple Intelligence stuff on the idea of a database, this personal context database that is on your device that knows about all your email, and it knows about your apps, and it knows about your calendar items and all of those things. And they've advertised that. But I know that I've heard about the idea, like a friend of mine who is a novelist who's put all of his novels that are in this particular series in a notebook. And, it's no matter what it is, it's a repository of knowledge that your brain contains, but doesn't necessarily contain with perfect accuracy. And you can't really necessarily follow the thread all the way. And so for this novelist, he was able to say, he's got like 6 books on this subject. And he was able to say, like, When was the last time, his example was, when was the last time this character fired a gun?
Yes.
And he wrote all those words. He can't remember that. But the AI that was trained on all of his novels can actually answer that very specific question accurately. So it's those, like, within a domain, it's like, I know, this little ball of stuff, all the articles that I've written, whatever it is, what did I say about this? And you can do like a Google search and try to get there, or a full text search, but having the model be able to do it, because it knows everything in there in a way that your brain just can't.
So Jason, basically NotebookLM in this case is like that incredible hyper nerd who asks the author questions at a Comic-Con panel, saying, and book 8, I noticed that, like, he said that he couldn't operate the starship himself unless there was a gunner. But
exactly.
then in book 12,
exactly,
like
that fan who then gets hired to be the writer's assistant,
exactly.
and invests in a lot of 3x5 cards or Notion databases or whatever they're using these days. And they're like, that happened to George R.R. Martin, right? One of the guys who wrote the Expanse books. That was his previous job, was keeping track of the lore for George R.R. Martin for Game of Thrones.
Funny.
That was
I
literally
didn't know that.
it. So
that's a great story.
You can use, which makes sense, right? Because it's like hundreds of characters and all these details and all of that. Yeah. And as a writer, even if you're the creator of that world, you don't necessarily remember that particular detail. And so the idea that you've got an assistant, which is this AI database that has read it, like, I mean, I threw like a, not quite at Alex's level, but I threw like a 6-part series from The Athletic about the changes in pitching over the last 15 years. I threw that in a notebook and generated a 10-minute long podcast. And like, I can roll my eyes at the kind of fake back and forth between the two fictional hosts, but in terms of them consuming thousands of words into a little 10-minute podcast about the main points, it nailed it. It really did. It was shocking.
That's the whole thing. And it just kind of sits in the background. And I was listening to that thing about CCTV. I'll try to play it here. This computer is not built for this, so I'm going to try it anyway. But let me know if you can hear it. Oh, that's going to the wrong place. Hold on. Let me.
It sounded like it was in the wrong place.
It was. Hold on. Let me. There are. Yeah. I got to be able to do sound better, faster. Let's try it. Let's see if this, can you hear
Third
this?
deep dive. It's funny. I was just thinking about how we used to think getting rid of policy, we all scroll past and click agree to.
You'd think so, right? But that brings us to the third key trend, and this is a big one. Consent. It's more complicated and deceptive than you think.
Okay, I'm listening.
So let me ask.
So you're right.
He editorialized, this is a big one. Is that a genuinely valuable thing, or is that just a made up, this is a big one? Because I hear that a lot in these podcasts, these NotebookLM podcasts. Oh, this one's a big one. But it sounds to me like it's fake editorializing.
Yeah, it is it's editorializing, but it's taking into account that this is a paper written by people who said this is a really big deal. Like,
so it does say in the paper, they say this is a big deal.
Oh, I don't know if they say this is a big one.
Well, that's my question. That's a big deal difference.
Yeah,
if it doesn't say that in the paper, but the LM is saying it.
I have to say that I'm not looking at this as a journalistic tool. Right. I think what I'm looking at it is that I want to listen to that. I want to listen to that thing, get the gist of it. If I want to go back and read it some more, I can. It's a big one or anything else doesn't really matter to me.
Okay.
I don't really care. I mean, because I can read through that. I mean, I listen to,
So this technique, by the way, has been around since ChatGPT 4, which it's called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. And I've been singing its praises since over a year, because remember I made those LLMs on ChatGPT by providing them with Emacs documentation or Lisp documentation, and they were very useful tools. They didn't turn it into a podcast, but that wouldn't be, the search part is much more useful to me than the podcast stuff. It's NotebookLM has given it a very consumer facing.
Well, and it's just it's very comfortable to listen to, and I can imagine my kids listening to this about American history or about whatever, and being able to. I just worry about your kids going, oh, the most important thing was Abe Lincoln was a log splitter, because that's what the LM added gratuitously to the conversation to make it sound like humans. I haven't seen that yet. I mean, and of all the time, I just got into it, and I've been throwing things at it, listening to them. And what I don't hear is it throwing in a lot of spurless, like just kind of like random stuff. It has these little.
It shouldn't hallucinate at all. It should only repeat the stuff that it's got.
Exactly. And that's what I found is that I found that it really is contained. And I do think that It's contained to that document. It's not just hallucinating because looking at the whole internet.
Right.
And I think that it is, I wouldn't say that it is perfect. I mean, there's definitely some stuff about it that are there, but I will say that the ability to aggregate, because like I was researching something, and so I had 200 pages that I do not want to read. I actually listened to it in Dream Reader or whatever a long time ago, and it was just really dry. It's a bunch of researchers talking about the sun, right? You know, and so it's just super dry. And I threw that into NotepadLM, and it came out with, you know, about 10 minutes of the most interesting part of all of the whole thing. Like, and it really seemed to condense that down. And I was like, oh, now I want to go back and read parts of it. But the point is that it was so, it distilled it so well that, you know, but without, I didn't detect any serious hallucinations.
Yeah, it's not going to it's not going to give you everything that's in that document in 10 minutes time, but it's going to give you a good overview. That is one of the, actually, joking aside, that's one of the reasons why I decided to give it all the transcripts from a year's worth of transcripts from my podcast, because I know what I said, I know what Florence Ion has said, I know the stuff that we've covered, and everything that it put into those 10 minutes was 100% just things that we've said. It managed to summarize our opinions on things. It gave us, it was really kind of a review of the podcast, so to speak, and was saying, here's the things that Flo and Andy are very, very important. And okay, that was spot on. The only thing that was odd was that in the transcripts, we're both, well, what we say is labeled. So there's Flo's lines are labeled, my lines are labeled. It's pulled out more stuff about what I said than what Flo said. It might be because I talk more. I don't know, but we're, instead of just and shouldn't be necessarily just harping on just this audio thing. Just the ability to ask it questions, the ability to say, work with an AI where your entire base of knowledge is only what I give you. You don't know anything except for these documents I've put into this notebook. And I really have been using it for the past few weeks. Sometimes, like, I'm coming up with a show lineup saying, did we already talk about that? And I can just open up that notebook and say, when was the last time that we talked about X? And it will not only say, it doesn't just like come up with text to say, oh, yes, you did, and no, you didn't. It will also give you a footnote saying, here is where, I found this.
Well, that's, to me, that's the most, I mean, what, I'm assuming it's Dan Morin, but I don't know what your novelist friend.
It's not. It's actually not. It's John Birmingham, although Dan Morin did apply to all of that too. John Birmingham, who wrote this series called World War III and World War 3.1. And he's like, there's so many characters in that, and he's just like, it's actually, I think Prince Harry is the character, because there's a long story. Prince Harry gets sent back in time with a battle group while he's serving in the military. Anyway, they're great books, but it's like, when did he fire a gun? And I was like, when did that happen last? When was the last time he was in a firefight?
That's a perfect use for it.
It's just like, think how long you'd have to search through your manuscripts to find, like, you can't search for the name, you can't search for the gun, you need to have them be
I prefer that to the
conceptual proximity.
Fake human banter, but you know, everybody's got a different way of reading it. The other thing, though, that's really interesting, and I wonder, Andy, you might not have to get transcripts anymore. It's now multimodal. So you might, I think, sounds like you could just feed it the audio of the podcasts or pictures or whatever, because it's fully multimodal now.
Yeah, I would say
that would be a saving. That would be good.
But Audio Hijack does it well, because I can label the inputs so that we know it doesn't. It knows that this audio channel is named Flo, this audio channel is named Andy, and it's good to have that rolling for a whole bunch of other things. But yeah, that's the ability for it to at least detect different speakers, and at least say speaker A, speaker B, this is background noise. It's just going to get better, especially with a model like Gemini, which is built for the modern models, not just Gemini, are built from the ground up to be multimodal. That's why a lot of companies in AI did a complete reset 2 or 3 years ago after speaking a whole bunch about, here's this model that we're doing. Okay, we're throwing that out. We're building this new model, because they realized that, no, you can't just add speech detection. You can't just add image detection. That has to be part of what it's built to know to begin with. And we're just seeing more and more and more opportunities for this to pay off.
Well, and I think that the other thing is when this is going to be an equalizer in some places, like legal counsel, because one of the big things is that, what prosecution likes to do is drop hundreds of boxes onto the defense. and the defense doesn't have the resources to read all those boxes. Now you're sitting there talking about, you scan them all, you put them all in there and go, when did he and where was he here and when was he here and when was he here? Now you're still going to have to go back and look for the evidence and look for the data there, but being able to tie those things together, taking thousands of pages or hundreds of thousands of pages of documents and being able to at least have it find the patterns that you're looking for, and then be able to show you where to look for those is going to be really powerful in many levels. Whether you're an investigative journalist, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're, a lot of these things are going to let you interrogate incredible, or just a scholar about, a certain, whether you're a scholar about the Bible or the many things or whatever it is, the ability to interrogate a document is pretty.
I won't keep going on and on about this, but because that art research project had been on for a long, long time, it has seen the differences between the digital resources we have, both as Google's search algorithms have gotten better and better on top of everything else. And now there is honestly, I've got hundreds and hundreds of French newspapers. I'm at the point where to answer a certain question, I'm so desperate that's okay. I'm just going to have to read daily and weekly newspapers to see if there's a mention of this person or some kind of hint as to what was going on. And I didn't take. I was smart enough to take Latin as my foreign language in high school. Latin and Spanish, but Latin. I didn't take French, and I've been trying to pick up at least. Here's what the words I'm kind of looking for are shaped like in French. And now I can simply take those PDFs and simply say, search for this inside these documents. They're just scans of old newspapers in a language I don't understand, and present the information back to me in a language I do understand. There's so much information that's locked up because it's never been indexed, and maybe because it's in an inaccessible language, or even that it's a handwritten note that is so cumbersome to try to parse. One of the artists that is part of the story had horrendous handwriting, and it really is, even though it's in English, I have to parse it letter by letter. And the idea of an AI being able to at least give me a good idea of, is this 5-page letter going to be worth the time? Or because the AI thinks it has this text I'm sort of looking for. Again, we're going to find there's going to be so many breakthroughs in so many areas, because this wall that was impenetrable, now we have the laser that can cut through it, and now we're in this whole new chamber of the pyramid, and we're learning things that we weren't able to access before.
All right, let's take a little break. When we come back, we have more from Gurman. We have rings, we have things. I notice, Andy, you're wearing a ring. Is that one of the Aura rings or one of the smart rings, or just
no, that's just a
wedding
silicon
band?
That's just a silicon.
Oh, okay.
For the silicon band.
It's not doing anything. Okay.
It's not doing. Well, it's making me look stylish. I think.
Is it engaging you to a partner? No. Okay. It's not. Then it's not doing anything.
No. I just daily reminder that I'm not a killer.
We will have more in just a little bit. Andy Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay, and Jason Snell.
Definitely not a killer.
He's not a killer. Definitely not. Definitely not a killer. We know that much. Anyway, we're pretty sure he's not a killer.
Definitely. I don't even think about it.
Don't even
think about it anymore.
Couldn't
really.
Possibly.
I'm embarrassed.
All
almost.
of your questions about my status as a killer are answered by my T-shirt. This is definitely not a killer.
You guys. This episode of MacBreak Weekly brought to you by Veeam, Veeam. When I found out about Veeam, I thought, well, there's no reason why anybody should ever again be bit by ransomware. Obviously, not everybody knows about Veeam. Veeam protects your data, and without your data, your customers' trust turns to digital dust. That's why Veeam's data protection and, underscore these two words, ransomware recovery ensures that you can secure and restore your enterprise data wherever and whenever you need it, no matter what happens. As the #1 global market leader in data resilience, Veeam is trusted by over 77% of the Fortune 500 to keep 77%. Makes you wonder about the other 23%. Who's protecting them against ransomware? 77% of the Fortune 500 use Veeam to keep their businesses running when digital disruptions like ransomware strike. Veeam lets you back up and recover your data instantly, everywhere it is, across your entire cloud ecosystem. Veeam proactively detects malicious activity, so maybe you don't even have to worry about it, right? You'd stop it in its tracks. Veeam removes the guesswork by automating your recovery plans and policies. Really important. If you don't have a plan and policy in place, Veeam will help you get there, and you really need to, right? And plus, Veeam is great. You'll get real-time support from ransomware recovery experts. They're there when you need them. No question, data is the lifeblood of your business. So get data resilient with Veeam. Go to Veeam.com to learn more. VEEAM, VEEAM.com to learn more. I bet you some of you are in that 23% that's not using it. Maybe you should go over it right now. Veeam.com. We thank them so much for supporting MacBreak Weekly. Yes, they work for Macs too. And we thank so much your participation here. And if you go to that site, that really helps us. So Veeam.com. Back to the show we go. I guess we should wrap up the Mark Gurman predictions. We haven't even, every Sunday he comes out with this newsletter. It's like a data bomb.
I mean, when he's got data to bomb, it is.
Yeah. He says, I expect Apple to kick off 2025 with several other new devices in the first half of the year, 13 and 15-inch MacBook Air models with M4. We'd expect that. He's even got the model numbers. I love that. A revamped iPhone SE. That's an interesting product because that's one that Apple does not put out every year.
Right. It sounds like this is the end of the home button. This is going to be
the last home button.
A Face ID, which when you think about it, it's been 7 years since the iPhone 10. So maybe it's time for the last iPhone to get Face ID finally, 7 years later.
And a USB-C, right?
Yep, presumably. And I would assume Apple Intelligence, actually. I would assume again
really on
that,
the SE.
that it will. I think they gotta again. I think maybe that's why they have that A18 non-Pro chip that's in the iPhone 16 is to put it in all of the base designs that still need Apple Intelligence support. But we'll see. I even the SE, I can't have a hard time imagining them making a new iPhone today that doesn't support Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, probably makes sense. They'd have AI, so to speak, everywhere.
Inside.
Speaking of USB-C, there will probably be new Magic keyboards with USB-C. I presume.
Keep dreaming the dream. One of these days, it's got to be true.
Keep lightning alive.
Lisa has an one of the 21-inch iMacs, and it's so frustrating to charge the keyboard and mouse because I need lightning. It's like I even upgraded the AirPods. By the way, Amazon Prime right now, because of Prime Days, I think has AirPod 2s. The AirPod Pro 2s for $169, which is a pretty good price if you want to get Type-C. I actually paid for a whole new pair of AirPods. Nothing wrong with my old ones, just to get Type-C charging. He also says refreshed 11-inch and 13-inch iPad Air models. That sounds about right. And we've been waiting for this upgraded AirTag for more than a year. We kept hearing these rumors. He says that's coming first half of next year as well. Also, new versions of the Mac Studio and Mac Pro with M4 chips in development, but they may take longer to arrive. He says he expects the Mac Studio launch closer to the middle of the year, maybe WWDC, that sounds like, with the Mac Pro going on sale sometime in the second half of 2025. That is really a non-product now for Apple, isn't it, the Mac Pro? It's like, who cares?
There's no logic to it. It exists because I think they already designed the case and because there is some small group inside Apple that says, oh, our clients still want it.
Right.
But I cannot believe there are enough clients to make it really worth building a whole separate product for, other than the fact that they already have the pieces, so they might as well keep just iterating on it, unless they've got a future plan.
The problem really is that there are a group of people, especially in creative, that would stop using Apple if they, that are making decisions about things and the issue is that, like for instance, for me, I have a studio. The next, other than maybe getting another Mac Mini, if there's a new one or a couple of them, the next big computer I'm going to get is the Pro because I need more I/O. Like I need the I/O. All it is a studio with I/O. And there's definitely, it's probably not a very large group of people, but there's definitely people there that a lot of us have decided that, I really thought that there were certain projects I just couldn't take on anymore because I didn't have the I/O for it. So I think that the having a lot more lanes in the USB-C is not a trivial thing for folks. So I think that it does provide that upper scale that I think Apple, it doesn't, I don't think they have to sell a lot of them, but I don't know if it's a waste of a product, but I'm really glad it exists because for those of us who are running those kinds of things, we desperately need that. And I'm bidding on an event right now. If I get it, I have to buy 3 of them.
Yeah. Aw. Do you get to keep those afterwards, Alex, and just put them in your library?
Yeah, they just they're just rentals.
You charge them to the customer. Or no? You rent them to the customer.
Yeah, oftentimes you do. I mean, you rent them to the customer, and sometimes it doesn't. It usually doesn't cost as much as the computer did, but it definitely reduces the cost of of buying it. So
probably if you do it a couple of times, it pays for it.
Yeah, it doesn't take very long for them to pay off. Yeah.
So let's talk about iOS 18.1 because Gurman says that's coming Monday, October 28th. That will be the beginning of Apple Intelligence. He says, I'm told Apple's taking its time with the rollout to ensure that major bugs are eliminated and it can support all the new traffic on its AI cloud servers. On Sunday, we were talking, maybe it was last Sunday, a week ago Sunday, or maybe it was Wednesday, I don't know. We were talking about Apple AI. And there was kind of the general insistence, oh no, they're going to use ChatGPT or they're going to use Gemini. No, Apple's got its own AI, right? And they're going to run them on their own servers. And they're going to go out to ChatGPT or Gemini only in the rare case when they can't handle it or they want to give you...
What they call world knowledge, the idea of they're not trying to train their LLM, at least not yet, on the idea of we've eaten the whole internet. And so if you ask us a question about a fact from history, we'll give you an answer. Apple doesn't want to be in that game, at least not yet. And they think that that's a great place where these other LLMs have been trained. And so that's the idea. ChatGPT or others will be where Siri kicks you to when you need an answer it can't answer.
And so Gurman says that you might be a little disappointed that the first version of Apple Intelligence you're getting in 18.1 will have things like notification summaries.
Yeah. Notification summaries, writing tools, I mean, it's not a lot.
It's not a lot.
It is the first creeping in of features, and there are a few. Notification summaries is nice. The new focus mode that sort of uses ML to determine if a message is worth bothering you about is actually a great idea. We'll see how it works in practice.
Does it work is the question.
It's a really smart idea to say, you don't need 90 notifications, but this one seems important.
I don't trust AI to know what I think is important.
If I really need something, I'm not going to have that feature turned on, but what I'm doing with it is doing it instead of do not disturb for when I'm working on stuff. And it's sort of all right, what do you got? Show me what breaks through. I would really like to know what you think is important. But
I forget who it was. I think someone at the Washington Post wrote about the beta of this, saying that it was very easily bamboozled by spam emails that say, "Oh my God, definitely." Yeah, and so that was bumming him out. It isn't, but every rumor that we've heard, and also what's in the public beta, we're in public beta 2, I think. It's interesting that almost all this stuff sounds like stuff that would and should be run on device, which would imply that they are still a ways away from being able to get that server stuff up and running, or at least able to handle what they figure is going to be an immense influence of millions and millions and millions of iPhones.
Jason, you're using the beta. Do you feel like what you're seeing in the beta is what we'll see in 18.1? Or
yeah, I do, and I think Andy's right. I think this is the stuff that's on device that they're capable of executing right now. It's like the writing tools are very much like Grammarly. It's that idea. It's a language model that's on the device. Obviously, summarization is something that an LLM does fairly well, and they're plowing it all through there. And that, over time it gets more complex and some of that stuff gets farmed out to the private compute cloud stuff. And they're going to want time there where that goes into beta and they see what the demand is like in the beta. And so how, do they have the resources to serve that? There will be some stuff that's gated by the availability of servers, right? They'll be probably features that they can't put in beta until they know that their servers can handle the volume of a beta, let alone a shipping version. So this is, Gurman sketched it out, I think, last week. There's already a plan. This is release 1. There's going to be a release 2, 18.2, that'll be more like December, that adds another little set. And then there'll be a sort of later in the winter 18.3 and a spring 18.4. And they're just going to kind of tick in the boxes there.
He says that the ChatGPT integration won't come till 18.2.
Right, so December.
December, and support for the Genmoji custom emoji, which
Right.
might be the single feature most people are waiting for. I don't know.
I'm pretty excited.
That looks fun.
I'm pretty excited about the
Looks fun.
emoji.
Hey,
It'll be fun.
looks fun. The thing is, I think Apple can dribble this out because I don't think there's massive demand.
Well, and
it's
there's not-
it's
again-
a little weird that Apple's advertising Apple
Right.
Intelligence features on its national ads.
I feel like that's a stock price analyst thing, you
Yeah,
know,
maybe.
to some degree that you're and I will say that the Apple Intelligence is probably one of the biggest sells of the new phone because the new phone was an incremental upgrade.
There was nothing else
in
to
my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, slightly better camera, slightly better everything. The only thing that really stood out was, it can actually do an Apple Intelligence. But I think that but keeping the stock, keeping analysts thinking that this is important, I think is important for Apple. But I think that, again, I think Apple has to move towards AI. I don't think that they're in nearly the same rush as software-based, folks like Google and Microsoft and everyone else. I'm already using all the Google tools and the ChatGPT tools and Midjourney and Meshy and all these other things on my Mac. So I'm not like, I don't feel like I'm missing out because it's not there. So I think that
Is Apple positioning its intelligence as AI for the people? Like that's
personal AI, I think, is a
Personal.
big part of it. And that goes back to
Private
that
AI.
idea of the
Private.
semantic index that
Right.
the fact that they're willing to just punt world knowledge to ChatGPT or whoever shows you that like they're not worried about that right now. Maybe they will ultimately, but that's the semantic index, I think, is a really interesting idea. And they do have an ad that shows it, which is great because it doesn't
Right.
exist and nobody can use it yet, but they're advertising it anyway.
So
But it's
weird.
the idea that they can mine all of your personal data that's on device. And like we were saying before, this is the equivalent of a novelist putting their books in a pile.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
I'm going to put all my email and calendar and everything else that's
And
in
your notes.
iCloud, all my notes, all of that data, and then the on-device LLM is going to be able to answer questions about it for me. And that's very personal. And I feel like that not only is that constrained enough that it's something that Apple can build, which is important, but also it's like that's your most personal part of using a device. Whereas searching the entire, sphere of world knowledge, it's fine if you go to ChatGPT or Google or whatever else you want to do. It's fine. Whatever.
And it's arguably something that only Apple can do. Like it's very, very hard for something like, are you going to really trust other folks to do this? Like, am I going to let Google like have that level of information about me? Probably not.
If you're an Android user, you'll have Gmail and all your docs there. But
I know,
on an
but,
iPhone,
like,
maybe less
Are you
likely.
really
Well,
going
it's-
to go down that path? Like, as soon as you start seeing ads that look like what you just asked about or what you were thinking about, it gets weird, And I think that that's the challenge, is that I don't feel like, I think that that's the challenge for everyone else. It's not that Google might be able to do it as well, but I think that because Google's using your information as part of their business model it makes it more complicated.
Well, that's a valid point, and I think there are a lot of people for whom that is a deciding factor. But nonetheless, the most popular mapping service is Google Maps. The most popular email service is Google Gmail. The most popular search engine is Google Search. People are not afraid to use Google if Google is giving them a product that is relatable to them, that's relevant, and they perceive as the best solution for what they've got. So I don't think that's going to be as big a problem. It's a bigger problem for a company like Facebook, which can't. If you're all in with Facebook, you're kind of screwed. If you're all in with Google, you've just made a deal, and you feel as though you're getting as much out of it or more than what you're giving up. Apple's imperative right here is that they do have to put this in the ads, because when people who don't necessarily care what phone they have go back to the Verizon store, go back to the AT&T store in the United States, or go to the whatever phone store they're going to worldwide, they've just, okay, I broke my screen, or this one is like 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I need a new one. Apple needs to at least have that as part of the conversation, because they're going to be shown a lot of really cool stuff, like Circle to Search on Android is really, really good. Google Lens, what they're putting in there is really, really good. The photo editing features, really, really good. And so they have to make sure that they have that beachhead moving forward, or else they could be perceived as not being able to give a good experience like half a year or a year down the road. And the last thing is that I mean, you said it, you kind of said it yourself, and it's something that I'm kind of navigating, where we don't know whether it's a good thing for a company like Google or OpenAI or whatever, or a bad thing. The fact that they are an app on the phone or a feature that's inside a web page, as opposed to something that's hardwired across the entire experience. Google will fail if at the time when Apple identifies the 80% of people, the features, the AI features that 80% of the users really, really want. Once they get that integrated, they're going to have to make sure they do better than just the basic, addition, multiplication, division, and subtraction. Apple's risk is that they'll lose all those people. Okay, great, you've got Apple Intelligence, but it's really, really conservative. It doesn't do a whole lot. I'll just stick with my ChatGPT app. I'll just stick with my Claude app. I'll just stick with my Gemini app, and maybe I'll dip into it. Just like for a lot of people, yes, it's nice that there's Apple Maps, but they still tap on that Google Maps icon every time they need directions. So they need to make sure that they're not just simply hanging back and saying, "Well, we'll let you assume that we're working on this." Apple never talks about unreleased products, but you can be assured that the rumors of us working on AI are true. They have to get in the game. They have to suit up, even if they're not going to win the gold medal. They have to, and even if they're not going to win a spot on the platform until 2026, they have to suit up and they have to take the field.
Well, and I think that there is again, they have a lot of time, I guess is what I would say, because the Apple users aren't moving at any great pace to choose some other platform. They might be choosing other apps, but I think that they're not. I think that's the challenge there, and I think for others, and I think as Apple starts to backfill, doing that, I do agree that having access to all the information across all your devices that is only yours and being able to interrogate that may be one of the most powerful things that we have, on a daily basis. So just tell me when I talked to Andy about this, in the last 10 years, there was some point where Andy and I were talking about this, and this. Where is that, and what were we talking about? Like, I don't even have to see the email. Tell me what we were talking about.
There is some urgency for Apple on this, because I think most people think of Apple Intelligence as Siri, and that's intelligence and Siri are two words that don't go together.
We do that.
It won't be till 18.4, which Gurman says won't be till the spring, that they're going to upgrade Siri at all.
Yeah, but I don't know if most people, other than Apple running ads about Apple Intelligence, when we say most people, I don't think most people are thinking about it at all. I think that they're
no, but if you ask them if Apple has intelligence, they'd say, well, there's Siri, but it's not very good. I would say that's the general reaction.
I think most people just aren't really interacting that much, so they're not worried about it. I am surprised my entire family.
People are aware of AI. Don't be confused about that. That's in the news. They are very aware of it. Whether they want it is another matter. I think 90% of people who are aware of it say, I don't need that. What is it? It's stupid. But people do know Siri, and they do use Siri, and they do swear at Siri pretty much universally.
Or they limit their, again, I think sometimes you limit your expectations of Siri in my household is mostly a tool to.
I understand, but you're way more sophisticated. If you talk to a normal person and say, Apple's got an AI now, and they say, yeah, Siri, and it's stupid, I think that's the universal reaction. And it's incumbent on Apple to say, I think there's a certain amount of urgency to make Siri be not stupid, and for Apple to say, yeah, we have an AI play here. But I think that's the problem is we're in a bubble. We don't really see what.
I think that they're talking about all of Apple Intelligence. If they had put out a better camera on the 16, they would have done just as well.
Right.
That's all people know. It would have if they had not said a thing about intelligence and just had a really, really, gone to 8K video or did, something dramatic with the camera, they probably would have had the same result as far as sales go, because I think that's still the most important thing that they make.
You're watching MacBreak Weekly. Andy Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay, Jason Snell. Let's move on to the Ring situation. Gurman says Apple is not developing a smart ring. But then CNBC says a smart ring's coming in 2026.
Yeah, they're quoting an analyst that was on a podcast, a CNBC podcast, who says that they have the capability of doing that within around 2026. I'm not sure if and this was according to a report. He's a senior analyst at I think it was Mac Rumors, so aptly put it, that they're comparing. This morning they published about like Gurman's report versus the CNBC report, saying, whereas this analyst, you had to Google his name, didn't you?
Ben Wood, chief analyst for CCS Insight, says.
But they are legit. But I don't know if he had access to like Gurman's report from the Sunday newsletter. He's saying that he has sources inside Apple that say it's dead. I don't know if I understand the reasons. He's saying that the reason why it's dead is because Apple doesn't want to cannibalize smartwatch sales. They want to make sure that everybody that they've
mistaken. Well, I have an Aura Ring and I have an Apple Watch, and I've chosen the Apple Watch. I think that is probably the market decision, right?
No, I mean, I think it's complementary. I don't think it's something that you would buy a ring instead of the watch. And a ring is still a $300, $400 price point. It's not as though someone who can't afford a $250 Apple Watch is going to be buying a ring instead.
Well, that's the point. Why cannibalize the Apple Watch sales? Well, so Aura is coming out with its Ring 4. Samsung has a Ring. Those are the two big. For people who don't know, these are health rings. They monitor your heartbeat, your temperature, sleep, and they're easy to wear. You wear them on your finger. I have to say they're not as accurate as the watch in my experience. Maybe Apple would make a more accurate ring. I don't know. I prefer the watch for all three of those uses.
Yeah. I like the idea of the ring, particularly because I'm not claiming to be like the vanguard of taste, but like I have a Pixel watch, I have an Apple Watch, and this summer I switched to a $20 Casio because for whatever reason, like the watches weren't giving me the sort of advantages of just a simple watch that tells me the time directly, that will give me a stopwatch when I need it and doesn't need to be recharged every single day, and is fun red plastic. But if I had, and I've been thinking about if I seem to have made this lifestyle change, maybe I should pick up like just a simple fitness band just for fitness tracking. And so for people who don't necessarily want to wear an Apple Watch as their watch every single day, that they have a few watches that they like, one that they inherited from their father, one that their spouse gave them like as an anniversary gift, they want to wear that instead. A ring doesn't occupy like one of those wrists. My only problem with rings is that they're super expensive. A $400 device that doesn't do as much as a $250 watch does, or a $150 fitness band. But the biggest thing that kind of gets me about it is that whereas even on a watch, it's possible to keep it going by replacing the battery if you know somebody who is really, really adept at doing something like that. A ring, through no fault of the manufacturer, it has to become e-waste in 2-3 years, however long it takes for that tiny little battery to no longer hold a useful charge. And that kind of rankles that you have a $300, $400 device that is designed to be thrown away in 3 or 4 years. That seems like too much money for something that you can't hand down to somebody else or give to someone when you upgrade and expect it to still have a useful life after. And there's no way to solve that, I know, and that's just why it kind of rankles me a little bit.
Yeah, usually with Apple products, I look at it and go, oh, that'd be really great. With the Ring, I'm kind of like, I don't know if and maybe if you. I guess I feel like you'd not have a watch and then the Ring would make sense. Like, I don't know why I would want, unless the Ring improves some kind of like gestures or something else. If it was doing something
that would be a big deal for Apple, I think, to be able to have input gestures on iPhone by doing a tap. The Samsung Ring does that, where you can use it as a trigger for a whole bunch of stuff. I think that would be really interesting if Apple did that.
Yeah, I think there's also just fundamentally a part of the audience that is not going to wear an Apple Watch, right?
That's true.
And if the health app matters to you and having a health thing, we talked about like, could they make a fitness band? And that seems to be much more likely to cannibalize an Apple Watch. But if they could make a Ring, they've talked about putting sensors in AirPods as well. I feel like if there are other devices Apple could make that would reach a segment of the audience that they can't find, they can't reach those people because they're just never going to wear an Apple Watch. If those people exist, and they would have to do the market research, having a Ring would maybe let you reach them because it's just way lower profile, and they're still going to be able to do health data, and you can wear it at night presumably, and they can maybe do some of the same sleep apnea detection and all of that other stuff that's there. And yes, I think also there's an additive potential quality there where there's only so much sensor space on the back of the Apple Watch. So having the ability to maybe have it be an extra data point. I think there's something. I think this is one of those products that Apple absolutely could do, and I think that it's an interesting question about why they haven't done it. And is it because they just want to be all focused on Apple Watch? Is it because as a company they know that they could really only make 15 products, 20 products, and this is too many? Because I feel this way about the Meta Ray-Bans too. Is like that sounds like a next generation companion to or alternative to AirPods, but they would have to go down that path. And, it's a lot of time and people and money and all those things. And they may look at it and say, well, I'd rather just do AirPods and Apple Watch and leave those on the table because while they're interesting, they don't meet the whatever threshold Apple has set.
Which is very high.
Exactly. Also, I mean, I think you're right. I don't think it would be cannibalizing. Also, we were talking about AI just a moment ago. They have to do AI. They have to. They don't. Whatever they felt about it before, the events of the past 3 or 4 years have said that they have to do this. If they're going to remain competitive. But rest. There's no market. There's no market for fitness rings right now that says that they have to enter this market. However, I do think that it's a really wonderful fit for them. Apple culturally, I'm sure they regard the Apple Watch as a tech product, as a product line, as a source of income. But I think everybody will agree with me that every time you hear Apple talk about health, they really talk about it like it's a holy calling. And if they figure out a way to have a new health device in the market, in their lineup, that would allow people who are, as you said, Jason, not into buying a watch to get on the Apple health wagon, I think they would do that. Also, I'm just excited to see what Apple would do just as a physical design object, as something that presents itself strictly as a piece of jewelry. Again, there's no display, there's no LED, there's no nothing. When the packaging of this, of what would an Apple ring look like, and that really gets me interested.
Solid gold for $20,000. That's how they're going to do it.
Rings are cheaper than gold watches.
Okay. 5,000 then.
If Johnny Ive were there, it'd be like, now let's talk about how many diamonds will be on the edition version of this ring.
So, New York Times, did Apple, this is Kevin Roos writing, just kill social apps? Some app makers, he found one. Worried. I found one.
One tech bro says yes.
A subtle change to iPhone's contact sharing permissions could make it hard for them to get the fast growth they need to compete. What was the change, first of all?
You can now select if you choose to share your contacts, which I haven't done for I don't know, 6 or 7 years.
When you share your contacts, you're doxing your friends.
I do not.
True.
I do not do that. As soon as I get to the app and it says, "Would you like to share contacts?" I'm like, "No, I do not want to do that."
Is there a hell no version of this button?
Twitter will not stop asking me. TikTok will not stop asking me. I know why they want it.
And now it's not a binary thing anymore. This is what's being complained about in this New York Times story.
It's actually really good.
You can, it's not binary. You can actually say, well, okay, this app is for X, and therefore it should know about these 4 people, and I'll let it know about them, and that's it. And before you had to say yes or no completely.
It's iOS 18 now. It's less gross. It was. It's just less. It's super gross.
Nikita Beer, a startup founder and advisor who has created and sold several viral apps aimed at young people, called the iOS changes. This is the New York Times again. Quote, the end of the world, and said they could render a new friend-based social apps dead on arrival. Yeah,
we've decided
screw you, whoever you are, Nikita.
We've decided that social apps are so good for everybody. So
how am I supposed to steal your contact information?
That's the funny thing is that Kevin Roos seems to take him a little more. I mean, he says it's a little hyperbolic, but he's like, here's an example of this thing that's going on, and the guy himself, I think, has got a pretty good attitude. He's like, oh, they closed up they closed the door on this grift, so I'll go on to the next one, right?
It's always another grift.
He knows it's like, oh, this was a hole that Apple left there way too long, and we can make money on it, and now they've closed it up, so we'll move on to the next one. He says that in the article. He's like, I guess I'll go start something else. I think that I think that the point of that article that's interesting, that it, more than this hyperbolic, like Apple has murdered social media by giving users the ability to not share their entire contact
we should
list
point
with
out
apps.
that probably Kevin Roos did not write the headline.
No,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think the article's maybe worse than the headline, honestly, but because he's so credulous to this one dude.
Yeah.
But the bigger point, which I think is a fair one, is Apple is so big and so powerful, especially when it comes to the iPhone, that any policy decision it makes, any feature decision
changes
it
the
makes,
world.
will change the world, will change markets, will break businesses, and potentially make new businesses. And so this is a great example where on one level, it's just logical, right? It's literally like, we did this for photos, we did this for files. It's a new security measure where we're removing the data sharing from the app itself. And instead it calls a different process. This is how it works technically. And then in that process, the user can choose what they want to pass on to the app, where before the app would just ask the system and get a permission, yes or no. It's a better system. It's more flexible. It means that some apps that would have been told no will now get some data that they didn't get before. But it also means that some apps that used to get all your data are not going to get all that data now. Anyway, a perfectly reasonable, consistent, privacy-focused, user empowerment-focused feature that's in line with what features they've been rolling out the last few years doesn't change the fact that there is a class of business that will be probably wrecked by this. And that's just, I mean, you can't, on Six Colors, I linked a criticism of the New York Times story by Nick here, who writes the great Pixel Envy blog. And basically what I said is, Apple's so big, it's like Godzilla. Godzilla doesn't always want to destroy Tokyo, right? Sometimes Godzilla just is out for a walk. He's out for a stroll. He wants to get some fresh air. He's along the beach, but his feet are so big that things are going to get crushed. Your car, your shop, it's going to get the glass broken out of the windows because he like strayed his foot a little bit. That's Apple. Like Apple, this is the reality. It's not the Apple that we all kind of grew up knowing about. Like every decision Apple makes, good or bad or indifferent, has huge potential to affect other people's lives.
100%. That's why, I mean, remember that Apple got into a huge controversy last year when they were indicating that, hey, we're putting this great new feature into Safari that our customers really, really want and been asking for. And so basically it means that we're going to make sure that you don't see ads that you don't want to see, that you're not going to be tracked in any way that you don't want to be tracked. And a lot of hands had to be raised by saying that maybe they want that, but that's how a lot of that content that they want gets paid for. And so please don't make it harder for us to publish. I mean, they had a point, but if the most popular mobile platform in the United States is suddenly not going to be monetizable through the web, that creates a problem, and that should be part of Apple's decision matrix. Should we?
I'll tell you what the end of the world is when the newspaper that purports to be the nation's news record,
international newspaper of record, yes,
becomes the link bait headline like that, and then, frankly, they've been doing it more and more. It's just sad. I guess it's the state of the world that they need money, but. Welcome to the world. I remember telling my mom, don't use those greeting card apps because you have to give all your addresses to them, and then they just sell them on.
That's the most offensive thing about that whole story and the headline is really it shows a deeply misplaced focus that I think is, I don't want to paint this with too broad a brush, but I will say there is a portion of the tech journalism and media community that feels like what their job is to serve the startups and the economy of technology and not the users of technology.
As long as I've been doing tech journalism, there have been people doing that.
Right. The hype squad. And it happens. And maybe it's because I came up through the kind of consumer magazine side instead of the B2B or something like TechCrunch. But like, I think it's deeply disturbing when an article says, this is dangerous because this dude can't get funding for his latest app because Apple's trying to protect your privacy and the content of your contacts list.
Nick here
bizarre.
Did a little research, went to LinkedIn and found Nikita Beer's first app, which was an app for teenagers that wouldn't even let you use it until you gave your entire address book to the app maker.
Yeah.
That tells you something. That's called that's worse than a growth hack. That's disgusting.
And again, it's Apple continuing, like they're just going to keep on turning the dial.
Yeah, keep
every
squeezing.
Update is like, hey, a little bit more closed. Because if they did it all at one time, then we'd have SEC or FTC or whatever. But if you just keep on because when Apple takes something on, a lot of times it's stuff that's pretty obvious, like this. This is a very obvious that it's gross, and we would love to. And it is. I thought it was weird that it asked for all or nothing for a long time.
By the way, Android still does.
Nothing. Yeah.
Android does not have the granular choice.
Not having granular choice. And again, I don't share it with anyone. I'm like, I'm just using the app. Like if someone finds me, that's fine. But I'm using the app. I'm not trying to like share it with my friends typically.
Yeah. Facebook got in trouble for ingesting people's contact lists without telling them. It's clearly a privacy violation.
Well,
and I bet you, just like me, have some names in your address book of people who rightly want to preserve their privacy and don't want their 100%. Personal email and phone number given out. Yeah. So I never ever say yes to that ever.
Yeah, and that's Jason made a great point that like I'm now sort of programmed at this point to not even like I don't even look at that notice. I just tap the you don't have access to my contacts. Whereas there could be a subset of people that I would give them access to if it were to help me out, if it were to help them out. And so if it makes me even consider giving some contact access to an app, that's a win for the app. And it's their responsibility, the makers of these apps, to change with the weather. Okay, it's not you can't tell the earth to stop raining. You have to figure out how to waterproof your stuff. And so I mean it's worth talking about that Apple makes decisions that sometimes has an effect that are hard for some people to handle, but when it's an industry, and particularly when they're doing stuff that's really, really nasty, it's really hard to feel sympathy, doesn't it?
What was that? Remember that contact list solution that would ask if their friends moved, it would automatically update the contact? It was Plug or something with a P. Yeah. But it famously spammed. If you gave it your address list, it would then send an email to every single person saying, hey, Leo just joined Plug. Yep. Wouldn't you like to join Plug? This has been going on forever. I'm surprised Apple took so long to do this. So what does it look like? Is it in 18.1?
Yeah, it's very much, it's in 18. It's very much what you saw with something like photo sharing before.
Yeah.
The idea that there is an out of process thing that comes up. So the app should be updated to use this new API that says, here, give me the contact picker. And then the contact picker appears, the app can't see it. And then you got some choices. You can choose like show it everything. You can still do that, show it nothing. Or you can actually say, here are the ones I want to share. And then you put them in the pile. And then the app sees what you've chosen to share. Instead of all or nothing, you have granular control over that. And because it's happening in an outside process, the app itself doesn't see anything. So it's just the same as saying, I would like to see your whole photo library. And you're like, oh, hell no, because they could take all your photos if they wanted to at that point. Any app could do that. What you say is, no, here's the photo you want. And you hand it one photo and it takes that photo. So same for contacts.
Same thing. I mean, I guess Kevin Roosin, the Key to Beer's objection is, there's a lot of work to go through all contacts and figure out who's okay.
Yeah.
We actually have
most
to build
people
a real
probably
service
just
that
say
people care
no.
about.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think that part of what is motivating Kevin Roos with this article is the idea that Apple can make decisions that affect everybody, like we've been saying. But I think, behind the scenes, what's happening here is two things. One is it's a gotcha. It's like, aha, see all the EU stuff and the US Justice Department saying that Apple is out there doing stuff that's sneaky. Here's another sneaky thing they're doing. And I think the problem is sometimes Apple does things that are self-serving. Sometimes they do things that are truly about user choice and privacy. A lot of times it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. And you'd think that government regulators would be on your side. But remember, the EU told Google that they couldn't do their privacy preserving browser changes because it would disadvantage advertisers. Sometimes they're looking out for the advertisers too. I agree with you. I think that's a really important thing for people to keep in the back of their mind, Jason, that some tech journalists are representing the tech industry and some tech journalists are representing consumers.
Yeah.
And we have always, and I know everybody on this panel and everybody on all of our shows have said, we work for consumers. We don't work for the tech industry.
Yeah.
And sometimes that bugs people. People come to this show and say, hey, you said something bad about Apple. What's wrong with you? And I say, it's not a fanboy show. We're trying to do some journalism here.
Well, yeah, there's this idea that we're on the team. And you see this sometimes in the disconnect that happens between executives and journalists where they're like, I thought we were on the same team, the technology team. And it's like, no. I'm on the team with my audience, which is people who use your technology.
We represent consumers.
Not you. And again, something like TechCrunch, it is sort of about that. And that's fine.
It's a business publication.
But the New York Times... Yeah. Like, I'm really disappointed in that story because it shows that the loyalty there seems to be to these kind of, in this case, gross set of apps and companies that are startups. And startups, who will speak for the tech bros? And it's no, they're gross. They're doing bad stuff. Apple closed the door. This should be, I'm not saying, hey, New York Times, write nice things about Apple. I'm saying if you're going to write about this, you should be responsible and say, this is a disgusting thing that is a door that has been closed by Apple, and it has fallout, it has ramifications. But let us not have a drop of sympathy for this guy.
When does anybody write about the groups that you should have sympathy for? Like when Apple suddenly just makes an app store rule that says, you can't update your app, any of your apps, until you support this API that we're rolling out. And when the makers of a 12-year-old successful app says, but this API has no relevance to what we do, and we're a two-person shop, and it's going to take us 2 months of not enhancing our app for users, that's the sort of stuff when Apple makes a unilateral decision that they're moving with big feet. Well, that's the sort of stuff you should be.
We talked last week about Halide not being able to get to the App Store because they wanted camera permissions. Why do you want those? You better explain that. Look, I think we're very fair both to Apple but we don't represent Apple here. We represent users who love Apple products. Except for you, Andy, you hate Apple products, but everybody else loves Apple products. So,
the only Apple product I hate was the solid gold Apple Watch. Other than that, I have criticisms, and I'm willing to let them live.
I'm coaxing you, of course.
I mean, this is what I always said when they were like, "Oh, you're the editor of Macworld. You must be a fan." And it's like, you know what? My audience are people who love Apple stuff in general and have devoted their lives to buying Apple stuff, and I care about them, and I want them to buy the right stuff and use the right stuff. But my job is to defend them and to look out for their interests and say, this is a good thing Apple did, this is a bad thing Apple did. Through that lens, my job is not to prop up Apple's stock price or make Apple executives feel good. It's to fight for I fight for the user. I'm basically Tron is what I'm saying.
Can I just say that after a particularly egregiously bad conversation with a briefing with a company, I actually made a sign that I had on my bulletin board in my office for a good couple of weeks, which is, it is not my job to be useful to a really, really, really high valued corporation.
Exactly.
Because I alluded to that in the conversation, but it's I
remember that sign. Well, so props to Apple. They did the right thing with the contact list. I wish they'd done it 10 years ago, but they did the right thing. And remember, folks, when you're giving over your contacts to a third party, you're doxing your friends' contacts. So stop it. Apple, of course, has to pay Ireland $13 billion in tax. The EU said, no, that was an unfair tax break. So they lost that one. But they did win one in Cupertino. So, you win a few. I don't think it was $13 billion tax break in Cupertino. But in Cupertino, let me see, I have the story here.
They get to keep some of the money they've already done, but the state of California basically said not all the tax money, the sales tax money collected in California goes to the city of Cupertino. There's going to be a new cash regime.
Which seems, and then, frankly, to be fair, I like Cupertino, but why should they get all the tax?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the answer is they've used Apple money to balance their budget for a long time, and they're like, geez, we're going to be in trouble here. So they're going to keep some of the money that was in an escrow account, but they are going to have to recalibrate their expectations. And it sounds like they had a sweetheart deal with Apple too, where they were going to kick some percentage of the revenue that they got from Apple back to Apple.
This is almost shocking. So any sale in California was attributed to Cupertino. All the other counties and jurisdictions lost out on the sales tax. There is an advantage because Cupertino's state sales tax was only 7.25%, which is lower than, say, San Francisco, which is over 8%. And there's an advantage to Apple because 1% of it is kicked back. No, 1% goes to Cupertino, and then Cupertino passes a third of that back to Apple. How was that ever legal? I don't know. The state finally investigated it, and the ruling is Cupertino can keep the tax income it got from Apple from the point when the state's investigation began. But starting next year, the state's going to implement a new system. So if you buy your Mac in San Francisco, you'll pay the sales tax to San Francisco, not Cupertino, which kind of makes sense. Am I right? Is that sales tax they're talking about?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yes.
But that's kind of what's going on in Ireland, right? Every sale, global sale, or every EU sale, I guess, Apple made went to the entity in Ireland, and Ireland had agreed to Apple. Well, we want you in Ireland, so we won't tax you. And the EU said, hey, wait a minute. We should point out none of these shenanigans are illegal. So Apple's not breaking the law. But maybe legislators might want to consider closing some of those loopholes. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess you can't blame Apple for taking every advantage of the tax laws as they stand.
There are a couple of famous boilerplate lines from Google from Apple. One of which is that Apple complies with the local rules, local laws of every country that it operates in. And the other one is Apple pays all the taxes that it is required to pay. It's like,
yes.
Okay.
My tax
Apple's
attorney,
one of the biggest taxpayers in the world. Is another one they use because they pay all the money.
We pay a lot of money. Yeah.
Once you start making money, you have a tendency to want to hire someone to find all the legal means that you can have that advise you. Maybe you should give some money away or buy something at the end of the year or all those things.
We all do
This
that.
is just at scale.
Yeah, it's a big scale. You will remember Jason Snell, the KNBR ads for Steven Moskowitz, a tax attorney.
That's right.
For many years, I had Steven as my tax attorney, and he would always say, Leo, don't pay a penny more than you have to or a penny less than you're legally required to. And then he'd pull all the strings he could. The problem is, if you're a normal working stiff, none of these breaks are available to you. I can't go to the city of Cupertino and say, I would like you to be my locus for all my sales tax in the state of California, unless you're big enough to have
Leo, have you tried? Have you asked?
I actually haven't. So maybe I need to go there.
Stop by town hall and just ask, hey, who do I see about...
Who do I see?
I got.
By the way, can I get a third of that back? Would you mind? I
got an idea I'd like to float by, but we have to turn that camera off before we talk.
Let me put it this way: you keep 2/3. All right, I'm sorry. It's just hard. It's hard to believe that this.
The thing is, it's similar to things like if you shoot in Georgia or you shoot in New Mexico, there's a huge tax incentives
on every film you see. The Georgia Peach State. Yeah,
exactly. All of that stuff is all part of this. This is the same as that, just done for a corporation and not a film studio.
Yeah, I mean, really, they shot wolves in Toronto, Vancouver, and Atlanta.
Yeah.
By the way, that's a pretty good. Wolves is a good movie. Apple, I think, really took a bath on it. I'm not sure. I know Napoleon cost him a bunch of money, and supposedly Apple is now backing off on the big budget films. Yeah. But the Brad Pitt, George Clooney vehicle was I enjoyed it. I finally
I've only gotten through the first 30 minutes. I just started.
Yeah, me too. We watched. This is what's changed. You used to go to a movie theater and you'd watch the whole movie.
Right.
Now,
exactly.
You watch it in chapters.
Yeah, like Carly, my wife wanted to see it last night, and I was like, I can watch the first 30 minutes. Like, it's too late. It's too late. Like I'm
the same way. It's past 9:30. I can't. My bedtime.
I have a show in the morning. So yeah.
So we finally finished it last night. Actually, really, it's Lisa. She can watch about an hour of a show.
Well, the thing is we're trained now because of all these series. Like when I see feature films, I have to say it's very hard. Like I go, oh, that's a commitment.
That's a 2 hour.
Like I'll watch, but over the weekend I watched 3. My son and my wife and I watched 3 of the Slow Horses together because we were a little behind.
Such
on
a good
season
show.
4. And we just couldn't stop.
Yeah, we're
just
saving it so we
show.
can binge it. Yeah, we're saving it till it's over, and then we'll binge it. It's so good. Gary Oldman is amazing, even if he is somewhat flatulent.
So good.
As scripted.
As scripted.
Is there a
It's an
special
acting choice.
category
It's
for
not
that?
Not reflecting on the craft services table. It's actually in the script.
The insult surge is so good. Like,
Oh,
it's
he is
just
so
worth it for the
funny.
insults. Yeah.
Oh my God, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
You're watching the Media Critics at MacBreak Weekly. We don't work for the movie industry. We work for you, the movie consumer.
That's right.
That's right.
Exactly.
Jason Snell from sixcolors.com, Alex Lindsay from officehours.global, and of course from GBH. You notice I dropped the W.
They did
GBH
too.
in Boston. They did too, Mr. Andy Ihnatko. When I worked in radio at WYBC, it always pissed me off that the first letter was 3 syllables.
Yeah.
And then the next 3 letters were 1 each. It's like W is a lot to say.
Even in text, that's a 25% reduction in bandwidth necessary to communicate the call letters of the station.
Yeah.
Very forward thinking.
And we know it's W because everybody's W east of the Mississippi. We just know it. So you don't have to. It's superfluous.
Yep. And you remind me of the old joke about URLs that www is the only is the only acronym that is much longer to pronounce than the words that's replacing.
Oh, whose idea was that? Actually, Tim Berners-Lee said very famously that he never expected anybody to type in URLs. Those are for machines. And he just assumed that the computer would avoid all that HTTP : crapola. I remember long fights, long battles at Tech TV. First, I got him to stop saying HTTP : Then I was successful enough. I got him to stop saying www. That was huge. Dot. Don't forget the dot. We were mentioning the SE4. This, according to rumors, will be the first iPhone with Apple's own 5G modem. Is that good or bad?
We don't know.
Yeah,
it could be
bad.
It's so it's untested, so it may or may not be good. It is rumored to have much better effects on battery life, that it's a typical Apple Silicon kind of like really efficient modem that is going to be, using their chip efficiency, their power efficiency. But the issue is always that Qualcomm has had experience all over the world in all sorts of different cellular network situations. And Apple, although they've been at it, and then before that Intel was at it for many years, has not been out in the field where it gets really ugly. So who knows how it's going to behave in those situations.
Yeah. In addition, like there are 2 advantages to it that you didn't point out that I was going to mention. One of them being it'll honk off Qualcomm, which will please Apple because they've been in lawsuits about how much Apple owes Qualcomm for licensing. But also it'll help them out in addition to power. It'll help them out in packaging, so that now if they can integrate that elsewhere into maybe even to another package that they've got on the iPhone, that will help them in design for a whole bunch of stuff.
In other words, put it on the SoC for the A.
Yeah, exactly. They could have like an iPhone.
Yeah.
They could create an iPhone on a chip if they wanted to do.
Right.
But I like this rumor because the idea of them having it on their least expensive phone and perhaps not their greatest selling phone and their latest phone, that's probably a big advantage because, as Jason said, there's going to be a lot of this. I think that for a modem, getting it 99% working takes 1% of the engineering time. Getting it fully working takes 99% of the time you're working on it.
Yeah, Apple's historically had trouble with its modems. In fact, they bought the Intel modem division in 2019 because they've been. Their relationship with Qualcomm is somewhat tetchy. This is from 9 to 5 Mac. In fact, Qualcomm sued them over patents and so forth. So 9 to 5 Mac sources say that the V59, that's the SE4, is equipped with a wireless modem designed by Apple, codenamed Centauri, will handle Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, and 5G, which is a lot, and will have much better battery life.
You can see why Apple wants to do this, right? Those
Sure.
are a lot of that stuff. Those networking, those are all from third parties right now, and that if they can build
and they pay
their
license
own,
fees as well, right?
yeah, and even if you are paying Qualcomm some patent fees and things like that, the fact that they could do this, and then in the long run, I imagine that this is just going to be something they want to put in their chips, and it allows them to miniaturize even further, because now you don't have to have a separate Bluetooth component that's in the package but is not from you. And like, there, you can see why they want to do this. It's not all just about getting out from under Qualcomm. It's about having the control and the ability to integrate and not have to have, like, I think they have now, it's like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are from Broadcom, and 5G is from Qualcomm, and then Apple's got its own stuff. And like, wouldn't it be nicer if they just had it all under one package that was from Apple?
And you feel like Apple, like at some point, just goes, wouldn't it be nice if you just open it up and it's one big chip? It just does all the things. It ties to all the components, and there's not any little bits and pieces left. And I think
this has always been Apple's goal, right? To source, make everything.
Not only that though, but
everything it needs to.
Everything it needs to,
and everything. Like any company, Apple, wants to commoditize anything that costs them money, and control anything that makes them money. Like that's what every company wants to do, is commoditize what costs you money, and control what makes you money. And so Apple's going to keep on looking at things that cost them money, that don't make the money, and figure out how to, stick them into something.
It took Apple a long time. I'm sitting in front of the 1984 iMac, which by the way is running Load Runner, in case you're curious. Yeah. What a great game that was. I actually, as soon as I started playing it on the Mac, I went, I wonder if I could still, and yes, there's an iPhone Load Runner, although it's got a lot of in-app purchase crap around it.
One thing though about if Apple,
I was just going to, let me finish.
Go ahead.
Which is that inside this is a MOSFET 8205 chip, 52, what is it? Well, now I've forgotten the designation, but they didn't make the chip. It took them a long time, going through a bunch of companies, including PowerPC and then Intel, to finally be making their own chips. But here we are 40, 50 years later, and they are finally making their own chips, right?
Yeah.
It's always been the goal, I think.
The other thing I wanted to point out is that we keep thinking, of course, about how this would affect iPhones, but I hope that this is part of a process that finally puts gives Macs a built-in wireless broadband, so if they can integrate that in. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I wouldn't call it. There must be either institutional, cultural problems or engineering problems that I can't guess at, because the idea of the Mac being the only device that the only computer that Apple makes that cannot connect to mobile broadband, especially when it's such an overwhelmingly popular option in the Windows side.
Is it though? Because Microsoft used to do it, and they took it out of all of their machines. And I think that they thought, people are just going to hotspot to their phone. By the way, errata portion, bad. This is not a 6502. Obviously, it's a Motorola 68,000. And I'm an idiot. And did I call it an iMac? Really? It's not an iMac. It's a Mac. It's the original Mac.
Sorry, that's why I thought you were moving to a different story.
I'm a moron. I don't know what I'm.
It's okay.
Anyway,
it's all. You
that's
drop
the errata
decade.
section.
It all happens in there.
I'm having a senior moment.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say I get the argument, because I love that my iPad has cellular and I use it, and I get when people always say, but you can just tether. You can just use a hotspot, and it's like, okay. Tethering is fussy. It's not as reliable. It drains the battery on two devices at once. There are lots of reasons why I would love the option of just connecting directly from my Mac and leaving my poor iPhone alone. And I don't know, like Andy said, I suspect it's a confluence of things. I suspect it's that they don't want to build a cellular chip in, have a separate set of cellular SKUs for every Mac laptop they sell, make another deal with Qualcomm. They have OS issues that they've been slowly working on, but like Mac OS was never built to analyze every packet, every data request, and see where it was going. Whereas iOS from day one, you could control what went over Wi-Fi and what went over cellular. macOS has never had that innately built in. They have been slowly kind of adding controls to do all of that stuff. And so right now, you're potentially, even now, dangerous where you could have your Mac being like, oh, I'm going to back up to Backblaze right now. And you're like, no, you're on the cellular network, don't do it. But the Mac, that the software might not know, and they might be ignorant of that. So there are lots. I think it's all of those reasons, plus some cultural reasons. The Mac's never had it, so why should we start now? There are alternatives. But that said, the iPad had it from day one.
Yeah.
And it's good, and it's not for everybody, but it's for $130 extra. Like once I went to the cellular, I was skeptical. Once I got a cellular iPad for the first time, it's like, forget it.
So
I'm never going back.
I agree.
I'm never going back.
It's expensive because it's $10 each or whatever
$10 a month.
Each time I add it, but every one of my iPads has cellular. By the way, I want to correct myself because Microsoft, which for a while did not put a 5G chip in, has put it in the Surface Pro 9. So Lenovo has it. The HP Dragonfly has it. There's quite a few, as you said, Andy, quite a few Windows laptops with 5G built in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would love to see it in a Mac. I guess anybody who, I don't leave the house anymore, but anybody who does leave the house, that would be a nice feature.
Yeah, I mean, there's this. It sounds so simple, particularly because Apple's done so much wonderful work in making it trivially easy to share a broadband connection from an iPhone. But A, what if you don't have an iPhone? But B, if that's not as easy as just this is something that my MacBook knows how to do, it can do on its own, and it just plain happens.
So nice. You're watching MacBreak Weekly. Andy Ihnatko, good-looking Andy Ihnatko with his Red Sox. Are the Red Sox in the playoffs?
No.
Very much not. But the
White Sox in the playoffs? Definitely.
No.
Kind of playoff that they don't want to be in. It's
how low can you go? Jason Snell, who is a real baseball fan, I have not watched a single postseason game this year.
It's been good this year. It's actually been a really fun set of games. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
very dramatic.
so where do we stand now? Do we have? Are we?
Everybody,
in the
I think
LCS?
everybody's tied with everybody else,
tied.
more or
Okay,
less.
Good.
Yeah,
that's good. That's what you want. Sixcolors.com, which has precious little baseball content, but is a lot of good Mac stuff in there. Really good. Yes. And of course, officehours.global's Alex Lindsay. What's going on in office hours today?
Yesterday we were talking about AI generation of actual geometry. So you can actually type in what you want. This is a program called Meshy.ai, or a website called Meshy.ai. And I was able to take something from like a little gnome from Midjourney and take them into, render that out, take it in there and say, build a 3D model. And it just builds a geometry, export that as USDZ and bring it into Keynote. So you're really starting to see the next generation of AI.
This is what I wanted to ask you about. Is this Depth Pro, the new Apple AI model?
No. This isn't Depth. Depth Pro that Apple's doing is really looking at a 2D image and calculating the 3D information that's in that image.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, and so Google's been doing this for a while. So Google's going to be like,
yeah.
Wait a minute. So Google's been doing this with their, for a long time. People have done different versions of this. This is probably the most advanced one that Apple has been made, I believe, open source. So Apple's puts this out and given it to everybody. That's the big difference, is that Apple just said,
and look at this link baity headline: Depth Pro, sharp monocular metric depth in less than a second. Come on, guys. That might be the title of the show, though. I like it. Yeah. So they take a 2D picture and project it into a 3D space.
Well, they're using the imagery in the image. They are figuring out what is where, how far away is something. So the depth, what you're seeing are those maps of what's in front of what is clearly way in front. And so being able to, if you're converting this, for instance, for AR, if you're converting it for a headset, if you're converting it, or if you want to calculate blur, so depth blur is one of those things that you might want to do. Or if you want to calculate compositing, so you want to figure out like if you think about, you open up any photo in Photos and you see your friend and you just push on it on your phone and it'll immediately make it a sticker. It's calculating what's in front of the other. It's not only calculating the edge, but it's calculating what's in front. Now, sometimes that's being helped because Apple had a depth map. They had
Because
a depth map
the
when they
camera
shot the
does it
LiDAR,
with the yeah.
but it will do it even on images that don't have
Yeah.
that depth map. It's figuring out and some of that's edge detection, but what they're showing here is it can also be, depth perception or calculating the depth of what's going on.
I imagine this is what they're using in Vision OS 2, because this is a feature in Vision OS 2 where you can take literally any photo and press the button and it turns it into a 3D photo. And the results are shockingly good. They're not perfect. And I think that if you've got two cameras or if you've got LiDAR or something like that so that you get more data, it's probably better for certain weird cases. But honestly, I'd say 9 times out of 10, what you get is perfect. Like to the point where I'm surprised that they said you can take spatial photos in iOS 16 or on iOS 18 on iPhone 16, because I thought, why? Like, why even try? Like, you don't need to take a spatial photo because Apple will, and I appreciate like it's real based on real data, but like it's funny that we've gotten to the point where the fake spatial photo is so good. I don't know if you really even need the real one. Honestly, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there are definitely things when things are moving, there's a bunch of idiosyncrasies that having the phone be able to grab things that it does a lot better if it has two individual images. But you're right that I think for the average photo, I think a lot of the stuff is pretty straightforward. But yeah, it's like, come a long way.
I took a scan.
Google's been doing this work for a long time.
Yeah, I took a scan from a photo from the 70s, right? And press the button on it, and like, okay, it's a 3D photo of my wife when she was like 6 with her grandfather, who was like, in his 80s, and
and they're
right there. It's amazing.
I don't know if you've watched any of these things that are happening now with the where they're taking AI and they're going back and getting Mary of Scots or different pictures, and they're making them like look like they're looking around and talking, and
that's creepy as hell. Yeah.
Some of that old archival stuff is cool though, because a lot of those old films, the frame rates were non-standard and sometimes they were hand cranked.
They fixed it. Yeah.
But you're taking actual like photos of people.
The Mona Lisa. They're taking the Mona Lisa and making
that's a little bit creepy. But I do really like the AI scaling of like old film that is the wrong frame rate or an inconsistent frame rate, and it's a little like what Peter Jackson did with They Shall Not Grow Old, right? The World War I documentary, where you make it feel, once you take it out of that, like everybody's moving a little too fast and everything's a little too weird, and you use your AI processing to slow it down so it feels like it's a standard 24 frames per second, and you clean it up, and you have the auto color go to it, and suddenly that thing that seemed like it was a cartoon from impossibly old time now feels like it's
it gets you emotionally engaged, because there's a switch that kind of puts a barrier on recognizing the people in this old film clip as real people, because again, they're jerking around and the herky-jerky movement, and there's black and white, there's all this dust and grain. But when every now and then when you see one of those like early movies, like just a test movie from 1892 of just a snowball fight like behind like the inventor's house, and all of a sudden it's high definition. So it's like, and also you can see people's expressions more. It's in some appreciable form of color. It's like these are real human beings, and when the real human beings are in a dire situation, they're in war. It's like it engages your empathy in a way that a historical newsreel just absolutely can't.
I would show you a clip right now, but I don't want Kaiser Wilhelm to sue me on YouTube. I can't take the.
He is really litigious when he's not out shooting birds. He's the Kaiser is suing on YouTube.
You should check Tech Meme, one of the top stories from 1850.
Yeah, those, and actually, I just wanted to let you know, Jason, for those of us who did live in the 70s, it was in fact in 2D, so you really weren't missing.
It's not true. I also lived in the 70s. It was very much in 3D, and also it was very smelly, very smelly.
Jason and I just lacked
stinky
patchouli everywhere.
Jason and I just lacked the fourth dimension of chemical enhancement that a lot of you 70s people had.
Smell-o-vision.
Too young.
Hey, let's do a Vision Pro segment. I got a piece. I got one story. What do you see? What do you know? What do you see?
Now it's time for Vision Pro.
It's time to talk the Vision Pro.
We got there.
I woke John Ashley up. Sorry, John. Next time I'll poke you before I do that. Apple has released a trailer If you've ever wondered what it's like to drown in a submarine,
You will find out on
cool.
Thursday.
now you can
trailer-
experience Submerged, the first Apple immersive video short film for Vision Pro.
And if you're asking, are there auga sounds? There are auga sounds all through this trailer. You're gonna love it.
Ooga!
Yeah,
But
this
are
is
there sad trombone sounds?
this plays to this really plays to the 3D element. So I think that this makes a lot of sense. It's cramped. There's a lot of geometry that's going to be going into vanishing points. There's a lot of sounds that can be all around you.
Yeah.
There's a lot. So the thing is
We
that,
looked until we could find a cramped
Right?
place to shoot our next immersive.
I mean,
They maybe took immersive a little bit too.
Yeah, you'll be immersed, all right.
literally.
So immersed, you're submerged.
Yeah. So
This is the director of All Quiet on the Western Front, German director. That
what
was
a great movie
That was a Best Picture nominee. It's a great movie, right?
Yeah.
And so he's the director,
Edward Berger.
and he's in. German directors in submarines can't be bad. There've been lots of great ones, and the idea that it's this submarine crew, so it's claustrophobic, which Alex is absolutely right. Like, there's so many things that play for this. I think I saw somewhere that it's 18 minutes long, which is great. Like, I heard short film, and I was like, so 4 minutes again? Is it going to be another 4 minutes? It's going to be longer than that.
Good.
And I can't wait to see this because as we've talked about here in the past, I think the immersive video has a lot of positive things, but the language, the grammar of cinema in a 2D or even 3D frame at 16:9-ish or something like that, like, we've learned that an ESPN Sports Center highlight cut of highlights doesn't work in immersive. It doesn't work.
Well,
There's a new grammar that you need to have. And so I'm wondering what in a scripted, directed piece of immersive video, what this particular director decided to do.
And Apple and I'm both excited and concerned. So and the reason for that is that I have worked with lots of directors that have done immersive stuff for Oculus and everything else, and their batting average is 0.
Yeah.
So like literally nobody has pulled this off because the directors come from this old way of thinking around.
Yeah. You have to rethink everything.
They're like, you have to control what the person's looking at, and you have to do this, and we have to cut, and we have to guide the thing, and it's like it's a different show. It's a different show.
Yeah.
But are there people out there now who understand this, or is this just so brand new?
There are. They just ignore us. So they, and it's been this way. I mean, I have friends that work on a lot of these things, and not on this one, but on a lot of the ones in the past, and I've worked on a bunch of them, and they don't let people just absorb what's happening. So it'll be interesting to see. There were a couple shots in the behind the scenes that I already went, ooh.
Yeah, you don't get to say, if you hire Alex Lindsay, you don't get to say
work.
the acclaimed director of All Quiet on the Western Front directed it. And I think Apple foolishly thinks that's important.
Well, and next week we'll talk about whether it worked or not.
We will.
I think that the format is extremely exciting, and I think people are going to really enjoy it. When they mature.
The trailer's the making of, right? It's as much how they did it.
The trailers are really making of, but there's only been a handful of really compelling things that I've seen on the Apple Vision Pro from a video perspective. All of us talk about the rhino shot. There's a rhino shot where the rhino comes right up to and everybody backs up, and so it is. There are certain shots where it really proves it, and I think when you look at the newest immersive trailer that Apple put together, I think that they extended some more of the footage from the Super Bowl, and they've got some other stuff there. The Super Bowl one, what it proved is what we all already know, which is under 20 feet, it's amazing. And like Elevated is a good example of over 20 feet, it's boring.
Yeah.
like this isn't worth doing. So Elevated is, I don't know how much they spent on that, but it was all of it was just pouring into the ground, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
There's weird shots in the Super Bowl one where they're jostling it in between. And I know that they're experimenting, but I would have experimented, looked at that, and realized that didn't work. Yeah. So I'm kind of
they have the opportunity to look at the footage before they put it.
I know.
In
it's not like it's live, and I just feel like I am concerned that Apple is not producing enough content for the Vision Pro, and B, because I think that there's a very valid, there's a valid market there, and B, when they publish stuff, it just doesn't feel like they get it. And usually what that means is that you're talking to a bunch of people from Hollywood who have a bunch of opinions about the way we tell stories, and and they, I only say this as someone who's been on those sets with them, with cameras like this, and it's always like all of us are sitting there just kind of like, okay,
yeah, but it's a great conversation. I mean, Jason brings up the key point that what is the purpose, what is the function of these immersive movies? What kind of effect do you want to have on the viewer? Because free roam games is its own form of art. Like, I'm not going to see something like in Red Dead Redemption. I'm not going to see the widow, the ghost of this woman, unless I'm in the right place, unless I'm looking for it. And then when I hear something, I have to turn to face it. So I am engaged as the driver of that storyline. But that's not been the concept of movie making. It's all about giving my attention and allowing myself to be emotionally manipulated and directed by a film and by a movie maker. So it's not so much. There's a reason why a shot has been set up in a certain way. It's because they want you to engage with exactly this part of the frame. There's lots of stuff that's happening, but this is the thing they want you to engage with. So what does it become if it's, by the way, there's going to be a moment between these two characters that happens because you notice that there's a glance or there's a little bit of a touch that they don't want anybody else in that scene to see, but it's important for you as the viewer to see it. How in that kind of storytelling will they make sure that you're not looking, oh wow, look at these dials, wow, can I look at the behind this dial, like, oh wow, look.
Well, I mean, and it's a little bit more automatic. 180 degrees is a lot less than 360, and what I mean by that is that there's everything's happening in front of you. It's a wide range, it's a wide field of view. The real challenge we had is in 3D, or not 3D, but in 360, you had to go, well, how do I get people to look behind us? And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that you may just not watch it once. You may watch it a couple times and absorb all the things that are happening. And maybe more, it may not be a narrative the way you think of it in the past, but more of an experience.
Right.
What we found so far, and why Apple has put out a lot of non-fictional stuff, is that experiences work really well in these environments, and narratives more challenging. But there's also just being somewhere, like you're in the room. Like one of the things that we did some tests on were on a stage play. So you have a stage play, except all I'm doing is I'm taking you and you're sitting in the perfect place. When they're sitting in the kitchen on the stage, you're sitting there with them while they're talking, and you're just watching them talk back and forth. And it's obvious who you're going to look at because that's what they're doing there. The hard part is that when you start wanting to tell the story by moving the camera, by cutting fast, by doing those kinds of things, those are the things that don't tend to work very well in an immersive environment. And it will work okay at this frame rate too. As the resolution and the frame rate increases, the audience's appetite for cuts and movement goes down. Like you lose more and more of the audience because they get sick. Anyone who has a sensitive inner ear will start to get really uncomfortable. And so the thing is that, but it's not. It's just a different experience. Like, it may not be movie making the way we think it is. It may not, you may want to have a 16:9 experience where you tell that story. And maybe that's I look at 24 frames a second at 16:9 or 235 or whatever is great for narrative films. It is not good for live. Like, live wants to be as many frames as I can push down that pipe at the highest resolution I can give you so that it just looks like glass. Yeah. Like, that's what I want live to be. But if I'm doing a film, 24 tells you, you can absorb the heavy camera movement, you can absorb the jib shots, you can absorb all those things in a way that you can't as much when you start getting into higher frame rates and higher resolution. And so it just really, I think that so if I'm doing a concert, I may want to have it be 120 frames a second at 8K per eye. If I'm doing a film, I may want to go back to the older frame rates.
Yeah. I mean, and actually you make a good point that hadn't really occurred to me before, that it could be that the natural language of this kind of presentation is more like a live theatrical presentation. Yeah. Like I haven't talked about opera in a while, but like when I go to like a production at the Met, like I always have my binoculars with me. And sometimes I'm like following what's happening upstage between like the two leads. Sometimes I'm looking at what the chorus is doing or what the actors are doing behind there. because I have the power to focus on what I want to focus on. And if the director of this production doesn't want me to see like what these 5 people are doing, like at the bar at the back of this room, they would not put that bar there, or they would direct those actors that, hey, just sit, drink your drinks, don't actually do any business. So I think
That's funny you should say that, 'cause that's one of the things I hated about the Hamilton movie, having seen the play, was that they forced you to look at certain things. A Vision Pro version of that or any theatrical experience would be so much better.
And
you can
imagine having the camera 5 feet or 10 feet from the front of the stage.
Right.
So you're
great seats. Yeah.
Better seats than you can buy. Like you know, so imagine it being above where the pit sits, you know, or right at the very back of the pit. And then an elevated.
You need to see the whole stage, obviously. So as far back as you need for that, but
it would be a chair that would get in everybody's way if you were there,
right?
And having that thing, and that would be, and again, it doesn't work at lower resolution. So when it starts to work is when you start getting into these 8K per eye, 12K per eye.
And if it had a klaxon, all the better. Then it would really be
dive.
Yeah, exactly.
One more Vision Pro story. It's not kind of, I don't know. It happened last week, and I saw it on our Mastodon, and I wasn't sure what to say about it. Christian Selig's unofficial YouTube app for Vision Pro, which people really like, Juno.
Good. It's real good.
Pulled from the App Store because Google complained, saying it violated the API and trademark policies.
Yeah, which it doesn't, but I think Christian Selig has decided, having fought it with Reddit for all that time over his Reddit client, which was excellent, that he decided it was a fun project for him to learn Vision Pro, and he doesn't need the drama, because I think he's right. I think that YouTube is wrong and that it doesn't do anything that YouTube says it does. And I think that he doesn't want to fight it anymore. And the fact is that if Apple is inclined to just do what YouTube wants here, which I think it probably is, there's a limit to what he can do to fight it. But it is a shame, because that is an exemplary app for Vision OS, and there aren't that many of them, and it's one of them. My conspiracy theory is going to be that Apple has been talking to YouTube about developing a Vision Pro YouTube app, and that this is part of that, right? Which is not necessarily not necessarily a quid pro quo, but like it's less. Look, if Google told Apple to pound sand, I think maybe Apple would be more receptive to Christian Selig and saying, we want to keep this in the Vision Pro App Store. But if they have already been working out the deal with Google to get a YouTube app for Vision Pro on Vision Pro sometime soon, that it's in their best interest to just be like, all right, they don't want this thing on here, we're going to kick it off. And so that's what I think maybe happened.
Remember, the iPhone used to have a YouTube app that was pre-installed in it before, like.
That Apple wrote, and then Google built their own instead. So, and this is, Google's apps are kind of laggards on iOS. They're always sort of behind the times, but I do think that this is one of those examples where there's 3D content and spatial content on YouTube, and it would be, and that's why Juno was so good, because it gave you access to some of that. And it is a great video watching environment. So it makes a lot of sense for the YouTube app to be there. And again, that's my hope anyway, is that one of the reasons this happened is because there is hope that there's a real YouTube app coming. Because Christian wasn't doing ad blocking. He wasn't trying to override the YouTube branding. It was really just a bunch of sort of browser extensions to make it make sense on Vision Pro. That's all it was. And they didn't want to listen. They just wanted it dead.
And that's our Vision Pro segment.
Now you see, now you know, we're done talking the Vision Pro.
Yeah, maybe we should add the
No. Air horns.
Dive.
Imagine that submarine. Yeah. The air horn submarine. Party submarine.
This is a different Navy. This isn't the Village People YMCA Navy. This is the U.S. This is the German.
Yeah.
There's so much more to talk about. We're running out of time here, unfortunately. Real quickly, I had a big decision to make yesterday. I have $7,000 hearing aids that I had purchased and was right at the end of the trial period where I could have turned them in. I went to the audiologist, and I'm thinking if Apple had come out with its hearing aid software for the AirPods Pro 2, I would have been able to test it and compare it. But now I don't know. Should I keep my hearing aids? And I decided to in the long run. Wall Street Journal story, the hearing aid revolution that wasn't over-the-counter hearing aids have high return rates. And I think that's because with an audiologist, you get a personal, somebody to talk to, they adjust it, you go in, and you're also more of a commitment. You've spent a lot more money and a lot more time to get the hearing aids. If you just go and buy some Jabra hearing aids over the counter, I don't think technologically, and by the way, my audiologist agreed with me that the over-the-counter hearing aids are worse technologically speaking, but I think there is something to be said for the human touch. So I won't be able, I kept the hearing aids so that I kept the hearing aids so that I can compare them to the AirPod. Do we know when the hearing aid capability is going to come out? I guess they're waiting for the
software
FDA.
update. They're not waiting for anything other than a software update, I think.
Okay.
So I think it should be available. That might be a 0.1 feacher. That might actually be end of the month.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an unbiased review. I have a bit of a bias because the difference between $249 and $7,000 is not insignificant.
And also, like, even if someone buys them for the purpose of, I think I'm losing my hearing a little bit, it'd be nice to see if that will work. Even if they don't get a miraculous improvement in their hearing, they've still got a pair of AirPods. So maybe AirPods. So maybe they'll keep them just for that reason.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. I have so many other things to talk about. I'd love to bring up, but we gotta get out of here because Steve Gibson he actually posted his show notes yesterday. He's so anxious to do the show.
We'll be back next week. So it's not like we're just going to be anticipating the end of the month anyway. So why not?
Okay, good. We'll save the M1 Max falling with dark horizontal lines on the screen.
Paste into the next tab in the spreadsheet.
Just move it right on over, John Ashley. Move it right on over. You're watching MacBreak Weekly, and we're so glad you do. If you're not yet a member of the club, one way you could support this show if you appreciate it. Notice we had one ad. That means this show costs us money if we don't get you to join the club. How about that for guilting you? $7 a month. Could that make all the difference? It does. It makes a huge difference. And you get some benefits, ad-free versions of all the show. We don't have to show you ads because you paid us, which means we got your money, which is what we need to keep going. You also get access to the Club Twit Discord, the special events we put on in there. We've got a Coffee Geek episode coming up on the 18th, Stacy's Book Club on the 25th, Micah's Creative Corner, I think, is next week. There's a lot of stuff we do in the club to make it more fun. I want to do some coding stuff. The problem is I'm so slow, it'll be like a 12-hour video. Can you handle that? Anyway, we'll do a test. Help us out, would you? twit.tv/club Twit. We really appreciate your support. And to all the Club Twit members, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. The money doesn't go into my pocket. It really goes in the pockets of these hosts, the people who put this show together, people like John Ashley. It is not cheap to do this. Staffing is the most expensive part of what we do, and we want to keep our staff happy and well employed, including all of our hosts. Time for our picks of the week. Speaking of our wonderful hosts, let's get Alex Lindsay's pick of the week.
Yeah, I've got two picks. One is, of course, there's been a hurricane, and some friends in office hours. Aaron Huslage is part of Connect Carolina, and just if you're looking for somewhere that might make a difference, they're really building up connections for basically these are
amazing
hubs.
How many people lost connectivity.
Yeah.
Not just power, but even, everything else, cell phone service, everything.
Exactly. And trying to coordinate everybody for safety, for all the other things. So they're building these hubs that allow people to get connected. And so they're raising money for that. And I think it's a great cause to look at. So if you're looking for somewhere to help that's more on the geek side, that is a great place of helping first responders be able to get connected there.
ConnectCarolina.org. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And then because it's actually not part of the Prime days, but it is a sale week, the Insta360 Link, which is what I consider probably the best webcam out there right now, is on sale. It's $179.
Oh, wow.
And so this is less than we used to pay for the Brios. there's a new Insta360 Link 2, and I'm actually not that excited about it because it doesn't have. So this is the original one, and the difference between the two is that the Insta360 2 is $199. This is normally $249, or it used to be $299. And now it's $179, and it has pan tilt, but it also has roll, which means that the camera can balance itself. So it can basically level itself out. And that is not in the new one. And so I don't know how long this one's going to be around, given that it's on sale. But I think it's actually better than the one that's replacing it, or at least the one that's come second. And at $179, if you're looking for a good webcam that's tiny, Leo's got one there. I have 4 of these. And so I may get a couple more because it's $179.
Looking at you.
Yeah, but it is, and it can do follow. It can do.
This is amazing. I love this, and the quality is superb. This is
and
what
you can actually go through Zoom. If it's connected to Zoom, you can go through Zoom and pan and tilt it around somebody else's camera if they give you permission. So
I put mine on a little tripod so I can get it on at eye level on the screen instead of on top of the screen. Although you could put it on top of the screen. Yeah, but it is a fantastic Zoom,
and you can hang it upside down as well. So you can you can reverse it, and it is 4K or 1080p. And it's got the software that controls it is probably is best in class, like color correction.
Oh yeah, I love it. Yeah,
framing control. You can save multiple positions. So, for instance, if you want to show your desk and then something else, you can save those positions and just hit the presets, and it'll just knock it out. So, and you make those keystrokes. And so anyway, it's a great webcam. If you're looking for one that's under $200, this is probably the best one there.
So
$179.99. You don't need the tripod bundle because it supports standard tripods, but you can get an additional tripod bundle for $20 more. Insta360.com. It's the store.insta360.com. And that's good input that you don't need the new version. The old one's fine.
The new version is less expensive, and the way that they say. So when the sale ends, this will go back to $249, and so this will be more expensive.
This is the better
version. I think what they thought was that, hey, we could sell more if it was less than $200. What do we take out of it to get it down to that price? And so they took out the gimbal or the roll, and so they took out that one axis.
It's one motor, right?
I would definitely. When this price goes up, and if you listen to this 3 months later and you go, oh, I still want one, it's $249. It's still worth it.
Still worth it. That's what I paid for mine.
$179 because that leveling. There's so much little fiddling, especially when you're putting it on your monitor or on your laptop or on something else. Getting it to level is not a minor thing, and so having to do it on its own is a pretty big deal. And once you get used to having a webcam that has a full gimbal, really hard to go back. Like it's not like I'm either on a Super 35 sensor like what I have now with the FX30, but when I go traveling or I need a small camera, the only thing I'm using are these links.
Yeah, so. I bring this X3 with me too. Their Insta camera.
Yeah, I haven't
Insta360. I really,
cool.
What you could do is you put it on a whip, like a real, and it looks like a drone.
Yeah, I've had a couple. There's a couple folks in office hours that use them, and they shoot these 360s, and then they do pan and scans inside of them.
Yeah,
I haven't been that excited about that as much, but they are cool cameras.
We shot some commercials with Anthony Nielsen and told me how to use it like a drone. We shot. Remember the electric bike we had? We shot. It's amazing. Yeah, the quality's not as good as this camera or even probably the Insta360 Link, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
Like
it is. It's cool. It's a cool one, and we definitely see some. And the 360 footage they were doing streaming where you can push it, you can stream from it, and then people can open it up on a player and look around. And so
I was thinking of doing that here. That's one of the like maybe setting this up so you can look around at me. Hi. In the studio. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bad idea. Store.insta360.com. They do make good stuff, I must say. Jason Snell, pick of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up. There was a pick I made last year for an app called StopTheMadness, and it's now StopTheMadness Pro, and it's $15, and I recommend it highly.
What is the madness we're stopping?
The madness we're stopping is the internet and the web in particular. This is an app from the Underpass App Company and Jeff Johnson, and it is it's not an ad blocker, but it is a browser improver.
Enabler. Yeah.
Yes. And so it works with all the major browsers. And in the Pro version is universal now. So it will run on your iPad, your iPhone, and your Mac. And the settings will sync via iCloud. Plus,
I'm getting this for Lisa. This was driving her crazy yesterday. Her bank wouldn't let her paste in her account number.
A lot of it is like, or there are like websites that I read where I want to command click on the links so I can save them in tabs and read them later. And they're like, no, certainly you want to replace this list of stories with this single page and read it now. And it's like, I don't. That's why I command clicked. Why are you blocking me? So all of that stuff, and there are lots of settings here, but all that stuff, you can turn it off. You can have it not hijack your clipboard, not put things on your clipboard you don't want. And here's the one that I really like, which is every site you go to now that says, hey, would you like to log in with Google at this site in the upper right-hand corner? It's like, no, you can't do that. off. And so that's the madness. It's not saying like, stop advertising. It's like, stop degrading the basic web experience that we want as users. And that's what Stop the Madness Pro does. Stop the Madness has been doing that for years. New Pro version. And the sync is really nice because you set your settings the way you want on your Mac, and then they're also on your iPad or your iPhone. It's great.
$15, but you buy it once and it's everywhere.
Yeah,
right?
and it's in the App Store. And if you bought Stop the Madness, there's a bundle you can go and see, and you might get a discount depending on when you bought it and all that. But it's in the App Store. Stop the Madness Pro.
Upgrade bundle.
It's good.
Yeah. Okay. Good rec. Oh man, I'm downloading it right now. That's awesome.
Stop that madness, Leo.
Stop it. It's driving me crazy. Andy Ihnatko, what's your pick of the week?
My pick of the week is dull, boring monospace fonts. God bless them all. We love
I love them.
So
I'm a fan.
Obviously, if you're a coder, you want to find a really good monospace font for your coding, if you're coding environment. But for like people like Jason and me, like who do most of our writing in Markdown and like BB Edit or Ulysses. The time we used to waste as writers not writing by choosing a good pen and a good ink and a good paper is like, what is the best monospace font? I've been curating like a long list of really good monospace fonts. A lot of them are free. My favorite right now is JetBrains Mono.
Very nice.
Because it's not boring. It has a little bit of life to it while still serving the role of being extremely clean, extremely easy to read, and just lets you focus on actual words without distracting. But I recently found that there's a site called codingfont.com. And by the way, JetBrains Mono is a free download. Codingfont.com, somebody, partly to promote like an app that they're doing, but is a collection, a single place that has a collection of like a couple of dozen like coding, like monospace fonts, and like a playground where you can see them in action. So, I mean, I think they even have like the monospace Comic Sans version in there,
which is, by the way, very good. I love it. Yeah,
I was, it redeems.
I use that in my terminal when I want to have fun.
yeah. But yeah, it'll help you. Again, if you're putting off writing the thing you're supposed to be writing, it'll give you a good 15 to 20 minutes of distraction. But on a more positive thing, again, like I make fun of this sort of stuff, but really, I have to say that my productivity in Ulysses increased by a non-zero amount before I encountered codingfont.com, but I was sampling a whole bunch of different fonts, and I finally realized, JetBrains Mono, that's the one I really, really like.
How do you get it to change fonts? It's not...
tap on the list on the left, I think.
Yeah, I'm tapping.
Oh, are you in font tournament mode? It's actually going to have you pick between the two.
I'm in font tournament mode.
And you're going to find which one you like the best.
I've used B612 Mono for a long time, but what about Oxygen Mono? Oh, that's pretty. Fira Mono, what a good one. Fira Code, even better. Oh, I love Inconsolata. I don't know these guys. Let me see. I don't want serifs in my mono. This is good. JetBrains, there it is. So what is? I'm having it's a bracket.
Yeah. You're finding the winner.
Yeah, exactly. You go through all of them, and you wind up looking at basically, okay, this is one.
This is the one I want, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll keep doing this. This is free. Codingfont.com. And I actually have had this bookmarked for a long time because I ever want to get in a conversation with coders that goes on for a long time, you just say, well, what font do you like? And then
you're still using DM Mono? Oh, come on.
GitHub recently published some very good working coding fonts that I really like, a series of them. But on the other hand, it's fun to just change every once in a while, right?
Yeah, it's a change is as good as a vacation, or whatever they say. And also, if you don't want, there are 2 tabs to the window: Play Font Tournament, which is the knockout version, or you can just click on Browse Fonts, and it will just like show you a list of fonts and samples, and it'll let you navigate that way.
I am currently using the GitHub fonts in my Emacs, but my terminal I think has the Comic Sans. I can't remember, but it's always kind of fun. Anyway, good one. Coding Font Mono. For those of you who
codingfont.com,
I'm sorry, codingfont.com. Thank you. Whoops. For those of you,
and a lot of them are free. I mean, that's the thing is you get the ones that are base systems of yours. But like I've been using JetBrains Mono for a while now, and it's like it's just free, and it's so good. There, a bunch of them that are just free fonts.
Simplicity
really
is the hardest thing to do, particularly in a font, and boy does it nail it.
GitHub's fonts are called Mana, Mona space, and it's I think quite a good family, and I've kind of settled on these for a little bit of time. But there you go. I'll probably change my tune soon. Andy Ihnatko, GBH, are they calling? I hear them. What are they saying?
Week from Thursday, 12:30. Go to wgbhnews.org to listen to it live or later.
Nice. It's great to have you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Jason Snell is at sixcolors.com, and his podcast is sixcolors.com/Jason. Is there anything you're particularly proud of these days?
No, I'm ashamed of it all. Ashamed.
It's all good.
Is there something you're less ashamed of than others?
I mean, but listeners to MacBreak Weekly may appreciate the Upgrade podcast I do with Mike Hurley.
I love that
Relay.
show. It's very
good. That's our weekly dive into all these similar topics.
And of course, you'll be doing your colors soon.
Halloween.
I hope you have a little orange and black in there for us.
Those are not official. Well, the orange is an official Apple color, but otherwise it'll be the usual spread of the Apple rainbow.
I think Apple will be in the black this quarter.
They will be,
but
probably.
Yes, in all likelihood, they're not going to lose money this quarter. But
that would be spooky, wouldn't it?
Jason, that would be scary. Jason does a lovely job with the Apple quarterly results, and October 31st will be no exception at sixcolors.com. Alex Lindsay. We've already talked a little bit about office hours. What's going on with your good friend Michael Krasny and Gray Matter?
We had Jim Louderback on on
You're
Friday.
Kidding.
Yeah, Jim came on. He was great. So that episode just came out today. So Jim was on, and we have Malcolm Gladwell this Friday.
Wow,
so,
that's a big one. Can people listen live?
Yeah, we've been backing into just doing audio for a little while as we kind of work through those, the quality of the audio without being able to double end on Zoom. We wanted to increase some of it because unlike this show, we have a lot less control over who's doing what and what hardware they have and whether they're on Wi-Fi and everything else. And so we've been kind of experimenting with that, but we're probably going to stream the Malcolm Gladwell one. so
there'll be a lot of interest.
Friday at 11 a.m. and most likely it's either going to come from a studio or it's going to come from the studio in my house. So we'll see how that turns out.
GrayMatter.show. I'm going to see Jim on Saturday where there's a Tech TV reunion picnic.
Oh, nice.
On a Saturday to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the second year of Tech TV.
I mean, he thinks about this so much that when you're asking questions, he just has he's got his newsletter on LinkedIn, and if you're not subscribed to that, it's always great. I always I feel like I keep up with things watching the little newsletter that goes by.
Nice. Very good. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jason. Thanks to our club members for making this show possible. We do MacBreak Weekly Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. And just so you know, the sugar industry of America has made sure that we will stay in summertime until after Halloween. So we will still be at that time, 1800 UTC, until November. Then everything changes. And I'll give you the new calculations at that time because it's too much for my little brain to figure out. But we don't change. It'll be Pacific Standard Time, but it'll still be 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can watch us live. There are 7 different streams now, and I'm so proud of this. Thanks to the folks at Restream, we're able to do the show. We use Ecamm, we use Zoom ISO, and we use Restream. So there's 3 different products. Actually, we use Splashtop and Mac Stadium too. John Ashley, our producer, is splash-topping to a Mac Studio and Mac Stadium, and the Mac Studio is running Ecamm Live, and that's where the switching. It's a crazy solution, which again, thank you, club members, because you help us pay for that. But we do, thanks to Restream, also stream it live to 7 different places. Of course, club members can watch in our Discord. We have a stage going. But you can also watch on YouTube, youtube.com/twit/live. All of our shows that we do live are streamed there. Same with twitch.tv/twit. I know that's a little confusing. Kick, Facebook, LinkedIn, x.com. I know I'm missing one of them, but I can't remember what it is. Oh, that's the Discord. So that's 7. So watch it live if you can. And if you can't, don't worry, because we make it into a podcast. Remember those? They used to be really big. So we're old timers. We like to make a podcast. You can download it from the website. Remember those? twit.tv/mbw. You can also watch the video on YouTube. There's a dedicated channel to MacBreak Weekly. You'll find the link at twit.tv/mbw. And there's also, of course, a podcast feed, which you can subscribe to with any podcast client. Just subscribe to it, choose audio or video. You'll get it automatically the minute we're done. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. It is now leet time, which means it's time for me to say, get back to work, because break time is over. Bye-bye.